Our goal with Cursor is to invent a new type of programming, a very different way to build software. So a world kind of after code. I think that more and more being an engineer will start to feel like being a logic designer. And really it will be about specifying your intent for how exactly you want everything to work.
What is the most counterintuitive thing you've learned so far about building Cursor?
We definitely didn't expect to be doing any of our own model development. And at this point, every magic moment in Cursor involves a custom model in some way.
What's something that you wish you knew before you got into this role?
Many people you hear hire too fast. I think we actually hired too slow to begin with.
You guys went from $0 to 100 million ARR in a year and a half, which is historic. Was there an inflection point where things just started to really take off?
The growth has been fairly just consistent on an exponential. An exponential to begin with feels fairly slow and the numbers are really low, and it didn't really feel off to the races to begin with.
What do you think is the secret to your success?
I think it's been...
Today, my guest is Michael Truell. Michael is co-founder and CEO of AnySphere, the company behind Cursor. If you've been living under a rock and haven't heard of Cursor, it is the leading AI code editor and is at the very forefront of changing how engineers and product teams build software. It's also one of the fastest growing products of all time, hitting 100 million ARR just 20 months after launching, and then 300 million ARR just 2 years since launch. Michael's been working on AI for 10 years. He studied computer science and math at MIT, did AI research at MIT and Google, and is a student of tech and business history. As you'll soon see, Michael thinks deeply about where things are heading and what the future of building software looks like. We chat about the origin story of Cursor, his prediction of what happens after code, his biggest counterintuitive lessons from building Cursor, where he sees things going for software engineers, and so much more. Michael does not do many podcasts. The only other podcast he's ever done is Lex Friedman, so it was a true honor to have Michael on. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. Also, if you become an annual subscriber of my newsletter, you get a year free of Perplexity, Linear, Superhuman, Notion, and Granola. Check it out at lennysnewsletter.com and click bundle. With that, I bring you Michael Truell. This episode is brought to you by Eppo. Eppo is a next-generation A/B testing and feature management platform built by alums of Airbnb and Snowflake for modern growth teams. Companies like Twitch, Miro, ClickUp, and DraftKings rely on Eppo to power their experiments. Experimentation is increasingly essential for driving growth and for understanding the performance of new features. And Eppo helps you increase experimentation velocity while unlocking rigorous, deep analysis in a way that no other commercial tool does. When I was at Airbnb, one of the things that I loved most was our experimentation platform, where I could set up experiments easily, troubleshoot issues, and analyze performance all on my own. Eppo does all that and more, with advanced statistical methods that can help you shave weeks off experiment time, an accessible UI for diving deeper into performance, and out-of-the-box reporting that helps you avoid annoying, prolonged analytic cycles. Eppo also makes it easy for you to share experiment insights with your team, sparking new ideas for the A/B testing flywheel. Eppo powers experimentation across every use case, including product, growth, machine learning, monetization, and email marketing. Check out Eppo at geteppo.com/Lenny and 10x your experiment velocity. That's geteppo.com/Lenny. This episode is brought to you by Vanta. When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things get complicated fast. Now you can assess risk, secure the trust of your customers, and automate compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more with a single platform, Vanta. Vanta's market-leading trust management platform helps you continuously monitor compliance alongside reporting and tracking risk. Plus, you can save hours by completing security questionnaires with Vanta AI. Join thousands of global companies that use Vanta to automate evidence collection, unify risk management, and streamline security reviews. Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/Lenny. That's VANTA.com/Lenny. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
When we were chatting earlier, you had this really interesting phrase, this idea of what comes after code. Talk about that, just like the vision you have of where you think things are going in terms of moving from code to maybe something else.
Our goal with Cursor is to invent sort of a new type of programming, a very different way to build software that's kind of just distilled down into you describing the intent to the computer for what you want. in the most concise way possible, and really distill down to just defining how you think the software should work and how you think it should look. And yeah, with the technology that we have today, and as it matures, we think you can get to a place where you can invent a method of building software that's legions higher level and more productive, in some cases more accessible too. And that process will be a gradual moving away from what building software looks like today. I want to contrast it with maybe like the vision of what software looks like in the future. That I think a couple of visions that are in the popular conscious that we at least have some disagreement with. One is there's a group of people who think that software building in the future is going to look very much like it does today, which mostly means text editing, formal programming languages like TypeScript and Go and C and Rust. And then there's another group that kind of thinks like you're just going to type into a bot and you're going to ask it to build you something, and then you're going to ask it to change something about what you're building. And it's kind of like this, chatbot, Slackbot style where you're talking to your engineering department. And we think that there are problems with both of those visions. I think that on the chatbot style end of things, and we think it's going to look like weirder than both. The problem with the chatbot style end of things is that lacks a lot of precision. If you want humans to have complete control over what the software looks like and how it works, you need to let them, gesture at what they want to be changed, in a form factor that's more precise than just, change this about my app, kind of in a text box removed from the whole thing. And then, the version of the world where kind of nothing changes, we think is wrong, because we think that the technology is going to get much, much, much better. And so a world, kind of after code, I think it looks like a world where you have a representation of the logic of your software that does look more like English, right? You have kind of written down, you can imagine in document form, you can imagine in kind of an evolution of programming language towards pseudocode. You have written down, the logic of the software, and you can edit that at a high level and you can point at that. And it won't be kind of the impenetrable millions of lines of code. It'll instead be something that's like much terser and easier to understand and easier to navigate. But that world where, the kind of crazy hard to understand symbols start to evolve towards something that's a little bit more human readable and human editable is one that we're working toward.
This is a profound point. I think I want to make sure people don't miss what you're saying here, which is that where you're envisioning in the next year, essentially, is kind of when things start to shift, is people move away from even seeing code, having to think in code in like JavaScript and Python. And there's this abstraction that will appear, essentially pseudocode, describing what the code should be doing more in English sentences.
Yep, we think it ends up looking like that. And we're very opinionated that path goes through kind of existing professional engineers. And it looks like this evolution away from code. And it definitely looks like the human still being in the driver's seat, right? And the human having both a ton of control over all aspects of the software and not giving that up. And then also the human having the ability to make changes very quickly, like having a fast iteration loop and not just like, having something in the background that's super slow and takes like weeks. Go do all your work for you.
This begs the question for people that are currently engineers or thinking about becoming engineers or designers or product managers, like what skills do you think will be more and more valuable in this world of what comes after code?
I think taste will be increasingly more valuable. And I think often when people think about tastes in the realm of software, they think about, visuals or taste over smooth animations and, coloring things, UI, UX, et cetera, on kind of the visual design of things. And I think more and more, and, the visual side of things is an important part of defining, a piece of software. But then, as mentioned before, I think that the other half of defining a piece of software is the logic of it and how the thing works. And we have amazing tools for speccing out the visuals of things. And then when you get into the logic of how a piece of software works, really the best representation we have of that is code right now. You can kind of gesture at it with Figma and you can gesture at it with writing down notes. But it's, when you have an actual working prototype. And so I think that more and more being an engineer will start to feel like being a logic designer. And really it will be about specifying your intent for how exactly you want everything to work. And it will less be about, it'd be more about the what and a little bit less about the how exactly you're going to do things under the hood. And so, yeah, I think taste will be increasingly important. I think one aspect of software engineering, and we're very far from this right now, and there are lots of funny memes going around the internet about some of the trials and tribulations people can run into if they trust AI for too many things when it comes to engineering, around building apps that have glaring deficiencies and problems and functionality issues. But I think we will get to a place where you will be able to be less careful as a software engineer, which right now is an incredibly important skill. And yeah, we'll move a little bit from carefulness and a little bit more towards taste.
This makes me think of vibe coding. Is that kind of what you're describing when you talk about not having to think about the details as much and just kind of going with the flow?
I think it's related. I think that vibe coding right now describes exactly kind of this state of creation that is pretty controversial, where you're generating a lot of code and you aren't really understanding the details. That is like a state of creation that then has lots of problems. Like, you don't really, by not understanding the details under the hood right now, you then very quickly get to a place where you're kind of limited at a certain point where you create something that's big enough that you can't change. And so I think some of the ideas that we're interested around, how do you give people continued control over all the details, when they don't really understand the code. Like, I think that solutions there are very relevant to the people who are vibe coding right now. I think that right now we lack the ability to let the tastemakers actually have complete control over the software. And so one of the issues also with vibe coding and letting taste really shine through from people is you can create stuff, but a lot of it is the AI making decisions that are unwieldy and you don't have control over.
One more question along these lines. You threw out this word taste. When you say taste, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking having the right idea for what should be built. And then just it will become more and more about kind of effortless translation of, here's exactly what you want built, here's how you want everything to work, here's how you want it to look. And then you'll be able to make that on a computer, and it will less be about this kind of translation layer of like, you and your team have a picture of what you'd want to build, and then you have to really painstakingly labor intensive, like, lay out that into a format that a computer can then execute and interpret. And so, yeah, I think less is less on the UI side of things. Maybe taste is a little bit of a misnomer, but just about having the right idea for what should be built.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to come back to these topics, but I want to actually zoom us back out to the beginnings of Cursor. I've never heard the origin story. I don't think many people know how this whole thing started. Basically, you guys are building one of the fastest growing products in the history of the world. It's changing the way people build products. It's changing careers, professions. It's changing so much. How did it all begin? Any memorable moments along the journey of the early days?
Cursor kind of started as a solution in search of a problem, and a little bit where it very much came from reflecting on how AI was going to get better over the course of the next 10 years. And there were kind of two defining moments. One was being really excited by using the first beta version of GitHub Copilot, actually. This was the first time we had used an AI product that was really, really, really useful and was actually just useful at all, and wasn't just a vaporware kind of demo thing. And in addition to being the first AI product that we had used that was useful, GitHub Copilot was also one of the most useful, if not the most useful, dev tool we'd ever adopted. And that got us really excited. Another moment that got us really excited was the series of scaling on's papers coming out of OpenAI and other places that showed that even if we had no new ideas, AI was going to get better and better just by pulling on simple levers like scaling up the models and also scaling up the data that was going into the models. And so at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, this got us excited about how AI products were now possible. This technology was going to mature into the future. And it felt like when we looked around, there were lots of people talking about making models. And it felt like people weren't really picking an area of knowledge work and thinking about what it was going to look like as AI got better and better. And, that set us on the path to like kind of an idea generation exercise. It was like, how are these areas of knowledge work going to change in the future as this tech gets more mature? Like, what is the, end state of the work going to look like? How are the tools that we use to do that work going to change? How are the models going to need to get better? to support changes in the work. And, once scaling and pre-training ran out, like, how are you going to keep pushing forward technological capabilities? And the misstep at the beginning of Cursor is we actually worked on, we sort of did this whole grand exercise, and we decided to work on, an area of knowledge work that we thought would be relatively uncompetitive and sleepy and boring. And no one would be looking at it because, we thought, oh, coding's great. Coding's totally interchangeable with AI, but, people are already doing that. And so there was a period of 4 months to begin with where we were actually working on a very different idea, which was helping to automate and augment mechanical engineering and building tools for mechanical engineers. There were problems from the get-go in that. We had, me and my co-founders, we weren't mechanical engineers. We had friends who were mechanical engineers, but we were very much unfamiliar with the field. And so there's a little bit of a blind man and the elephant problem from the get-go. There were problems around, how would you actually take the models that exist today and make them useful for mechanical engineering? The way we net it out is you need to actually develop your own models from the get-go. And the way we did that was tricky. And, there's not a lot of data on the internet of 3D models of different tools and parts and the steps that it took to build up to those 3D models. And then getting them from the sources that have them is like also a tricky process too. But eventually what happened was, we came to our senses. We realized we're not super excited about mechanical engineering. It's not the thing we want to dedicate our lives to. And we looked around and in the area of programming, it felt like, despite, a decent amount of time ensuing, not much had changed. And it felt like the people that were working on the space maybe had a disconnect with us. And it felt like they weren't being sufficiently ambitious about where everything was going to go in the future and how kind of all of software creation was going to flow through these models. And that's what set us off on the path to building Cursor.
Okay, so interesting. Okay, so first of all, I love that this is advice that you often hear of go after a boring industry because no one's going to be there and there's opportunity. And, sometimes it works, but I love that in this journey, it's like, no, actually go after the hottest, most popular space, AI coding, app building, and it worked out. And the way you phrased it just now is you didn't see enough ambition potentially, that you thought there was more to be done. So it feels like that's an interesting lesson. Even if something looks like, okay, it's too late, there's GitHub Copilots out there, some other products. If you notice that they're just not as ambitious as they could be, or as you are, or you see almost a flaw in their approach, that there's still a big opportunity. Does that resonate?
That totally resonates. And I think it's a part of it is you need there to be like leapfrogs that can happen. You need there to be things that you can do. And I think the exciting thing about AI is in a bunch of places, and I think this is actually, very much still true of our space, and can talk about how we think about that and how we deal with that. But I think that just the ceiling is really high. And yes, if you look around, probably even if you take the best tool in kind of like any of these fields, there should be a lot more that needs to be done over the next few years. And so that space, having that high ceiling, I think is unique amongst areas of software, at least the degree to which it is high with AI.
Let's come back to the IDE question. So there's kind of a few routes you could have taken, and other companies are doing different routes. So there's building an IDE for engineers to work within and adding AI magic to it. There's another route of just a full AI agentic Devon sort of product. And then there's just like a model that is very good at coding and focusing on building the best possible coding model. What made you decide and see that the IDE path was the best route?
The folks who were from the get-go working on just a model or working on end-to-end automation of programming, I think they were trying to build something very different from us, which is we care about giving humans control over all of the decisions in kind of the end tool that they're building. And I think those folks were very much thinking of a future where kind of, end-to-end, the whole thing is done by AI. And maybe like the AI is making all the decisions too. And so one, there was kind of like a personal interest component. Two, I think that always we've tried to be intense realists about where the technology is today. Very, very, very excited about how AI is going to mature over the course of many decades. But, I think that sometimes people, there's an instinct to see AI do magical things in one area and then kind of anthropomorphize these models and think, it's better than a smart person here, and so it must be better than a smart person there. But these things have massive issues. And we from the very start, our product development process was really about dogfooding and using the tool intensely every day. And we never wanted to ship anything that wasn't useful to us. And we had the benefit of doing that because we were the end user part of our product. And I think that instills a realism in you around where the tech is right now. And so that definitely made us think that we need the humans to be in the driver's seat. The AI cannot do everything. We were also interested in giving humans that control too for personal reasons. And so that gets you away from just you're a model company, that also gets you away from just kind of this end-to-end stuff without the human having control. And then the way you get to an IDE versus maybe a plugin to an existing coding environment is the belief that programming is going to flow through these models, and the act of programming is going to change a lot over the course of the next few years. And the extensibility that existing coding environments have is so limited. So if you think that the UI is going to change a lot, if you think that the form factor programming is going to change a lot, you necessarily need to have control over the entire application.
I know that you guys today have an IDE, and that's probably the bias you have of this is maybe where the future is heading. But I'm just curious, do you think a big part of the future is also going to be AI engineers that are just sitting in Slack and just doing things for you? Is that something that fits into Cursor one day?
I think you'll want the ability to move between all of these things fairly effortlessly. And sometimes I think you will want to have the thing kind of go spin off on its own for a while. And then I think you'll want the ability to pull in the AI's work and then work with it very, very, very quickly, right? And then maybe have it go spin off again. And so these like kind of background versus foreground form factors, I think you want that all to work well in one place. And I think the background stuff, there's like a segment of programming that it's especially useful for, which is type of programming tasks where it's very easy to specify exactly what you want without much description, and exactly what correctness looks like without much description. And often that's bug fixes are kind of like are a great example of that, but it's definitely not all of programming. So I think that what the IDE is will totally change over time, and kind of our approach to having our own editor was premised on it's going to have to evolve over time. And I think that will both include, you can spin off things from different surface areas like Slack or your issue tracker or whatever it is. And I think that will also include the pane of glass that you're staring at is going to change a lot. We just mostly think of an IDE as the place where you are building software.
I think something people don't talk enough about with talking about agents and all these AI engineers are going to be doing all this stuff for you is basically we're all becoming engineering managers with a lot of reports that are just like not that smart, and you have to do a lot of reviewing and approving and specifying. I guess thoughts on that, and is there anything you could do to make that easier? Because that sounds really hard. Like anyone that has a large team has had a large team being like, oh my God, all these junior people just checking in with me doing not high quality work over and over. It's just like, what a life. It's going to suck.
Yeah. Maybe eventually one-on-ones with
so many one-on-ones.
So the customers we've seen have most success with AI, I think, are still fairly conservative about some of the ways in which they use this stuff. And so I do think today that the most successful customers really lean on things like our next edit prediction, where your coding is normal and we're predicting the next sequence of actions you're going to do. And then they also really lean on like scoping down the stuff that you're going to hand off to the bot. And there's, for a fixed percent of your time spent reviewing code, you could from an agent or from an AI overall, you could, there's kind of two patterns. One is you could spend a bunch of time specifying things up front, the AI goes and works, and then you then go and review the AI's work, and then you're done. That's the whole task. Or you could really chop things up, right? So you can specify a little bit, AI writes something, review, specify a little bit, AI writes something, review. And that's kind of, auto-completes all in the way of that spectrum. And still we see often the most successful people using these tools are chopping things up right now and keeping things fairly slow.
That sounds less terrible. I'm glad there's a solution here. I want to go back to you guys building Cursor for the first time. What was the point where you realized this is ready? What was kind of a moment of like, okay, I think this is time to put it out there and see what happens?
So when we started building Cursor, we were fairly paranoid about spinning for a while without releasing to the world. And so to begin with, too, we actually, the first version of Cursor was hand rolled. Now we use VS Code kind of as a base, like many browsers use Chromium as a base, and have worked off of that. To begin with, we didn't, and built a prototype of Cursor from scratch, and that involved a lot of work. We had to build our own. There were a lot of things that go into a modern code editor, including support for many different languages and navigation support for moving amongst the language. Error checking support for things. There's, things like, an integrated command line, the ability to use like remote servers to the ability to connect to remote servers to view and run code. And so we kind of just like went on this blitz of building things incredibly quickly, building kind of our own editor from scratch, and then also the AI components. And it was after like a couple of months that we just, it was after maybe 5 weeks that we were living on the editor full time, and had thrown away our previous editor, and we're using a new one. And then once it got to a point where we found it a bit useful, then we put it in other people's hands and had this like very short beta period. And then we launched it out to the world within a couple of months from the first line of code. I think it was probably 3 months. And it was definitely a like, let's just get this out to people and build in public quickly. The thing that took us by surprise is we thought we would be building for a couple hundred people for a long time. And, from the get-go, there was kind of an immediate crush of interest and a lot of feedback too. And that was super helpful. We learned from that. And that's actually, why we switched to being based off of VS Code instead of just, this hand-rolled thing. A lot of that was motivated by kind of the initial user feedback. And, and then have been iterating in public from there.
I like how you understated the traction that you got. I think you guys went from $0 to 100 million ARR in like a year and a half or something like that, which is historic. What do you think was the key to success of something like this? You talked about dog fooding being a big part of it. Like you built it in 3 months. That's insane. What do you think is the secret to your success?
The first version was not, the 3-month version wasn't very good. And so I think it's been, a sustained paranoia about, there are all of these ways in which this thing could get better. The end goal is really to invent a very new form of programming that involves automating a lot of coding, as we know today. And no matter, where we are with Cursor, it feels like we're very, very far away from that end goal. And so there's always a lot to do. But I think it's been kind of, a lot of it hasn't been over-rotated on kind of that initial push, but instead is like the continued evolution of the tool and just making the tool consistently better.
Was there an inflection point after those 3 months where things just started to really take off?
To be honest, it felt fairly slow to begin with. And, maybe comes from some impatience on our part. But one, I think, there's the overall speed of the growth, which is, continues to take us by surprise. I think one of the things that has been most surprising too is that the growth has been fairly just consistent on an exponential of just consistent month-over-month growth, accelerated at times by launches on our part and other things. But, an exponential to begin with feels fairly slow when the numbers are really low. And so it didn't really feel off to the races to begin with.
To me, this sounds like build it and they will come actually working. You guys just built an awesome product that you loved yourselves as engineers. You put it out, people just loved it, told everyone about it.
It being essentially all just us, the team working on the product and making the product good in lieu of, other things one could spend one's time on. We definitely spent time on tons of other things. For instance, building the team was incredibly important. And, doing things like, support rotations are very important. But some of the normal things that people would maybe reach for in building the company early on, we really let those fires burn for a long time, especially when it came to things like sales and marketing. And so just working on the product and building a product that you like your team likes, and then, also then adjusting it for a subset of users, that can kind of sound simple, but then it's hard to do that well. And there are a bunch of different directions one could have run in, a bunch of different product directions. And I think that, one of the difficult things, I think focus and kind of strategically picking the right things to build and prioritizing effectively is tricky. I think another thing that's tricky about this domain is it's kind of a new form of product building where it's very interdisciplinary in that we are something in between a normal software company and then, in between a normal software company and then a foundation model company, in that, we want to develop we're developing a product for millions of people, and that, that side of things has to be excellent. But then also one important dimension of product quality is doing more and more on the science and doing more and more on the model side of things in places where it makes sense. And so that element of things, doing that well too, has been tricky. But yeah, the overall thing would note is, maybe, some of these things sound simple to specify, but then like doing them well is hard, and there are a bunch of different ways you can run it.
I'm excited to have Andrew Luo joining us today. Andrew is CEO of One Schema, one of our longtime podcast sponsors. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Lenny. Great to be here.
So what is new with One Schema? I know that you work with some of my favorite companies like Ramp and Vanta and Watershed. I heard you guys launched a new data intake product that automates the hours of manual work that teams spend importing and mapping and integrating CSV and Excel files.
Yes, so we just launched the 2.0 of One Schema file feeds. We've rebuilt it from the ground up with AI. We saw so many customers coming to us with teams of data engineers that struggled with the manual work required to clean messy spreadsheets. File Feeds 2.0 allows non-technical teams to automate the process of transforming CSV and Excel files with just a simple prompt. We support all of the trickiest file integrations, SFTP, S3, and even email.
I can tell you that if my team had to build integrations like this, how nice would it be to take this off our roadmap and instead use something like One Schema?
Absolutely, Lenny. We've heard so many horror stories of outages from even just a single bad record in transactions, employee files, purchase orders, you name it. Debugging these issues is often like finding a needle in a haystack. One Schema stops any bad data from entering your system and automatically validates your files, generating error reports with the exact issues in all bad files.
I know that importing incorrect data can cause all kinds of pain for your customers and quickly lose their trust. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. If you want to learn more, head on over to oneschema.co. That's oneschema.co. What is the most counterintuitive thing you've learned so far about building Cursor, building AI products?
I think one thing that's been counterintuitive for us, hinted at it a little bit before, but is we definitely didn't expect to be doing any of our own model development when we started. As mentioned, when we got into this, there were companies that were immediately from the get-go going and just focusing on kind of training a model from scratch. And we had done the calculation for it to train GPT-4 and just knew that was not going to be something we were going to be able to do. And it also felt a little bit like focusing one's attention in the wrong area, because there are lots of amazing models out there, and why do all of this work to replicate kind of what other players have done, especially on the pre-training side of things, taking a neural network that knows nothing and then teaching it the whole internet. And so we thought we weren't going to be doing that at all. And it seemed clear to us from the start that the existing models, there were lots of things that they could be doing for us that they weren't doing because there wasn't the right tool built for them. In fact, though, we do a ton of model development, and internally it's a big focus for us on the hiring front, and have assembled a fantastic team there. And it's also been a big win on the product quality side of things for us. And at this point, every magic moment in Cursor involves a custom model in some way. And so that was definitely counterintuitive and surprising. And it's been a gradual thing where there was an initial use case for training our own model where it really didn't make sense to use any of the biggest foundation models. That was incredibly successful. Kind of moved to another use case that worked really well, and have been going from there. And one of the the helpful things in doing this sort of model development is picking your spots carefully, not trying to reinvent the wheel, not trying to focus on places maybe where the best foundation models are excellent, but instead kind of focusing on their weaknesses and how you can complement them.
I think this is going to be surprising to a lot of people hearing that you have your own models. When people talk about Cursor and all the folks in the space, they would kind of call them GPT wrappers. They're just sitting on top of ChatGPT or Sonnet. And what you're saying is that you have your own models. Talk about just like the stack behind the scenes.
Yeah, of course. So we definitely use the biggest foundation models, a bunch of different ways. They're really important components of bringing the Cursor experience to people. The places where we use our own models. So sometimes it's to serve a use case that a foundation model wouldn't be able to serve at all for cost or speed reasons. And so one example of that is the autocomplete side of things. And so this can be a little bit tricky for people who don't code to understand. But code is this weird form of work where sometimes really the next 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes of your work is entirely predictable from looking over your shoulder. And I would contrast this with writing. So writing, everyone or lots of people are familiar with, Gmail's autocomplete and kind of the different forms of autocomplete that show up when you're trying to compose text messages or emails or things like that. They can only be so helpful because often it's just really not clear what you're going to be writing just by looking at what you've written before. But in code, sometimes when you edit a part of a code base, it's just you're going to need to change things in other parts of a code base. And it's entirely clear how you're going to need to change things. And so one core part of Cursor is this really souped up autocomplete experience where we predict like the next set of things that you're going to be doing across multiple files, across multiple places within a file. And making models good at that use case, one, there's this speed component of those models need to be really fast. They need to give you a completion within 300 milliseconds. There's also this cost component of we're running tons and tons and tons of model calls. Every keystroke, we need to be changing our prediction for what you're going to do next. And then it's also this really specialty use case of you need models that are really good, not at completing the next token, just like a generic text sequence, but are really good at auto-completing a series of diffs, looking at what's changed within a code base and then predicting the next set of things that are going to change, both deleted and added and all of that. And we found a ton of success in training models specifically for that task. So that's a place where, no foundation models are involved. It's kind of our own thing. We don't have a lot of labeling or branding about this in the app, but that, powers a very core part of Cursor. And then, another set of places where we use our own models are to help things like Sonnet or Gemini or GPT. And those sit both on the input of those big models and on the output. On the input side of things, those models are searching throughout a code base, trying to figure out the parts of a code base to show to one of these big models. You can kind of think about this as like a mini Google search that's specifically built for finding the relevant parts of a code base to show one of these big models. And then on the output side of things, we take the sketches of the changes that these models are suggesting you make with that code base. And then, we have models that then kind of fill in the details of like, the high level thinking is done by these smartest models. They spend a few tokens on doing that. And then these smaller specialty, incredibly fast models coupled with some inference tricks, then take those high level changes and turn them actually into full code diffs. And so it's been super helpful for pushing on quality in places where you need a specialty task. And it's been super helpful for pushing on speed, which is such an important dimension of product quality for us too.
This is so interesting. I just had Kevin Wheel on the podcast, CPO of OpenAI, and he calls this the ensemble of models. That's the same way they work, to use the best feature of each one. And to your point, the cost advantages of using cheaper models. These other models, are they based on like Llama and things like that, just open source models that you guys plug into and build on?
Yeah. So again, we try to be very pragmatic about the place that we're going to do this work, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And so starting from the very best, pre-trained models that exist out there, often open source ones, sometimes in collaboration with these big model providers that don't share their weights out into the world. Because the thing we care about less is, the ability to read line by line, the matrix of weights that then, go to give you a certain output. And it's, we just care about the ability to kind of, to train these things, to post-train them. And so by and large, yes, open source models, sometimes working with the closed source providers too to tune things.
This leads to a discussion that a lot of AI founders always think about, and investors, which is moats and defensibility in AI. So it feels like one is custom models is a moat in the space. How do you just think about long-term defensibility in the space, knowing there's other folks, as you said, launching constantly, trying to eat your lunch?
I think that, there are ways to build in inertia and, traditional moats, but I think by and large, we're in a space where, it is incumbent on us to continue to try to build the best thing, and everyone in this industry. And I truly just think that the ceiling is so high that kind of no matter what, entrenchment you build, you can be leapfrogged. And I think that this resembles markets that are maybe a little bit different from normal software markets, normal enterprise markets of the past. I think one that comes to mind is the market for search engines at the end of 1999, or at the end of the 90s and beginning of the 2000s. I think another market that comes to mind that resembles this market in many ways. It's actually just like the development of the personal computer and mini computers, in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And I think that, yes, in each of those markets, the ceiling was incredibly high. It was possible to switch. You could keep getting value for like the incremental hour of a smart person's time, the incremental R&D dollar for a really long time. You wouldn't run out of useful things to build. And then, in search in particular, not in the computer case, having distribution was helpful for making the product better too, in that you could tune the algorithms, you could tune the learning based off of the data and the feedback you're getting from users. And I think that, all of those dynamics exist in our market too. And so I think that, maybe the sad truth for people like us, but then like the amazing truth for the world is, I think that there are many leaf drives that exist. There's many, more useful things to build. We're a long way away from where we can be in, 5-10 years. And it's kind of incumbent on us to keep that engine going.
So what I'm hearing, this sounds like a lot more like a consumer sort of moat, where it's just be the best thing consistently so that people stick with you, versus creating lock-in and things like that, where they're just for like Salesforce, where it's just contract with the entire company and you have to use this product.
Yeah. And I think the important thing to note is, if you're in a space where like you kind of run out of useful things to do very quickly, then that's not a great situation to be in. But if you're in a place where, big investments in, having more and more great people working on the right path can keep giving you value, then you can get kind of these economies of scale of R&D, and you can kind of have, deeply work on the technology in the right direction and get to a place where that is defensible. But yes, it is, I think there's a consumer-like tendency to it. And I really think it's just, about building the best thing possible.
Do you think in the future there's one winner in this space, or do you think it's going to be a world of a number of products like this?
I think the market is just so very big. And this is also one thing that, you asked about the IDE thing early on. And one thing that I think tripped up some people that were thinking about the space is like, they looked at the IDE market of the past 10 years and they said, who's making money off of editors? Like, there's all these, it's this super fragmented space where everyone kind of has their own thing with their own configuration. And, there's one company that commercially actually makes money off of making great editors, but like that company is only so big. And, then like the conclusion was it was going to look like that in the future. And I think that the thing that people missed was that, there was only so much you could do building an editor in the 2010s for coders. And, the company that made money off of editors was doing things like making it easy to navigate around a code base and, doing some error checking and type checking for things and, having good debugging tools, but like, which were all very useful. But I think that the set of things you can build for programmers, I think the set of things you can build for knowledge workers in many different areas just goes very far and very deep. And I think that really kind of like the problem in front of all of us is like the automation of a lot of busy work and knowledge work, and really changing all the areas of knowledge work in front of us to be much higher level and more productive. So that was all, a long-winded way to say, I think the market's really, really big that we're in. I think it's much bigger than people have realized, than, the other, building tools for developers in the past. And I think that there will be a bunch of different solutions. I think that there will be one company, and to be determined if it's going to be us, but I do think that there will be one company that builds the general tool that builds almost all the world's software. And that will be a very, very generationally big business. But I think that there will be kind of niches you can occupy in doing something for a particular segment of the market or for a very particular part of the software development lifecycle. But the general like programming shifts from just writing formal programming languages to something way higher level. This is the application you purchase and use to do that. I think that there will be generally one winner there, and it will be a very big business.
Juicy. Along those lines, it's interesting that Microsoft was actually like right at this, like at the center of this first, with an amazing product, amazing distribution. Copilot, you said, was like the thing that got you over the hump of like, wow, there could be something really big here. And it doesn't feel like they're winning. It feels like they're falling behind. What do you think? What do you think happened there?
I think that there are like specific historical reasons why Copilot might not have lived up, or so far have kind of lived up to the expectations that some people have for it. And then I think that there are structural reasons. I think the structural reason is, and to be clear, Microsoft, in the Copilot case, obviously big inspiration for our work. And in general, I think they do lots of awesome things, and we're users of many Microsoft products. But I think that this is a market that's not super friendly to incumbents, in that a market that's friendly to incumbents might be one where there's only so much to do. It kind of gets commoditized fairly quickly, and you can bundle that in with other products. And where the ROI between different products is quite small. And in that case, perhaps it doesn't make sense to buy the innovative solution. It makes sense to just kind of buy the thing that's bundled in with other stuff. Another market that might be particularly helpful for incumbents is one where there's from the get-go, it's just like you have your stuff in one place, and it's like really, really excruciatingly hard to switch. And for better or for worse, I think in our case, you can try out different tools and you can decide which product you think is better. And so that's not super friendly to incumbents, and that's more friendly to whoever you think is going to have the most innovative product. And then the specific historical reasons, like as I understand them, are the group of people that worked on the first version of Copilot have by and large gone on to do other things at other places. I think it's been a little hard to kind of coordinate among all the different departments and parties that might be involved in making something like this.
I want to come back to Cursor. A question I like to ask everyone that's building a tool like this: if you could sit next to every new user that uses Cursor for the first time, just whisper a couple of tips in their ear to be more successful, most successful with Cursor, what would be like 1 or 2 tips?
I think right now, and we'd want to fix this at a product level, a lot of being successful with Cursor is kind of having a taste for like what the models can do, both what complexity of a task they can handle, and like kind of how much you need to specify, things to that model, but like having a taste for the quality of the model and where its gaps exist and what it can do and what it can't. And right now we don't do a good job in the product of like, educating people around that, and maybe giving people some swim lanes, giving people some guidelines. But so to develop that taste, would give kind of two tips. So one is, as mentioned before, would bias less toward like, hey, trying to have the model like, trying in one go to tell the model, hey, here's exactly what I want you to do, then seeing the output and then either being disappointed or accepting the entire thing for an entire big task. Instead, what I would do is I would chop things up into bits, and you can spend basically, the same amount of time specifying things overall, but chopped up more. So you're specifying a little bit, you're getting a little bit of work, you're specifying a little bit, getting a little bit of work, and not doing as much the like, let's write a giant thing, telling the model exactly what to do. I think that will be a little bit of a recipe for disaster right now. And so biasing toward chopping things up at the same time, and it might make sense to do this on a side project and not on your professional work, I would encourage people to, especially, developers who are kind of used to existing workflows for building software, I would encourage people to explicitly try to fall on their face and try to discover the limits of what these models can do by, being ambitious in like kind of a safe environment, like perhaps a side project, and trying to kind of go hand to hand to use AI to the fullest. Because, sometimes we do or a lot of the time we run into people who haven't given the AI yet a fair shake and are kind of underestimating its abilities. So generally biasing towards chopping things up and making things smaller, but like to discover the limits of what you can do there, like explicitly just kind of try to go for broke in a safe environment and, get a taste for it. You might be surprised in some of the places where the model doesn't break.
What I'm essentially hearing is kind of build a gut feeling of what the model can do and how far it can take an idea versus just kind of guiding it along. And I bet that you need to rebuild this gut every time there's a new model launch. Like when it's on it, 4.0 comes out, you have to kind of do this again. Is that generally right?
Yes. It's not, for the past few years, it hasn't been as big as like, I think the first kind of experience people have had with some of these big models. But this is also a problem we would hope to solve much better just for users and take the burden off of them. But yeah, each of these things have slightly different quirks and different personalities.
Kind of along these lines, something that people are always debating, tools like Cursor, are they more helpful to junior engineers or are they more helpful to senior engineers? Do they make senior engineers 10x better? Do they make junior engineers more like senior engineers? Who do you think benefits most today from Cursor?
I think across the board, both of these cohorts benefit in big ways. It's a little hard to say on the relative ranking. I will say they fall into different anti-patterns. So the junior engineers we see going a little too wholesale, relying on AI for everything. And we're not yet in a place where you can kind of do that end to end on a professional tool, working with tens, hundreds of other people within a long lived code base. And then the senior engineers, for many folks, it's not true for all. And we actually often, one of the ways these tools are adopted is there's developer experience teams within companies. Often those are staffed by incredibly senior people, because often those are people who, are building tools to make the rest of the engineers within an organization more productive. And we've seen some very, very, boundary pushing kind of, we've seen people who are, on the front lines of like really trying to adopt the technology as much as possible there. But by and large, I would say on average, as a group, the senior engineers underrate what AI can do for them and stick to their existing workflows. And so the relative ranking is a little hard. I think they both have, they fall into different anti-patterns, but they both by and large get big benefits with these tools.
That makes absolute sense. I love that it's like two ends of the spectrum, like expect too much, don't expect enough. And it's like the three bears. Is that the allegory?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe the sort of senior, but not staff, it's right in the middle. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Just a couple more questions. What's something that you wish you knew before you got into this role? If you could go back to Michael at the beginning of Cursor, which was not that long ago, and you could give him some advice, what's something that you would tell him?
The tough thing with this is it feels like so much of the hard-won knowledge is tacit and a bit hard to communicate verbally. And the sad fact of life feels like for some areas of human endeavor, like you kind of do need to fall on your face to either need to fall on your face to learn the correct thing, or you need to be kind of around someone who's a great example of kind of excellence in the thing. And one area where we have felt this is hiring. I think that we actually we tried to be incredibly patient on the hiring front. It was really important to us that, both for personal reasons and also for, I think actually for the company's strategy, having a world-class group of engineers and researchers to work on Cursor with us was going to be incredibly important. Also getting people who fit, a sort of mix of, intellectual curiosity and experimentation, because there can be so many new things we need to build. And then also kind of an intellectual honesty and maybe micro pessimism and bluntness, because, with all the noise and, especially as the company's grown and the business has grown, keeping a level head, I think is incredibly important too. But getting the right group of people into the company, was, the thing that maybe more than anything else, apart from building the product, we really, really, fussed over. And, we actually waited a long time to grow the team because of that. And I think that many people you hear hired too fast. I think we actually hired too slow to begin with. I think it could have been remedied. I think we could have been better at it. And, the method of recruiting that we ended up eventually falling into and working really well for us, which isn't that novel, of like going after people that we think are really world-class and like recruiting them over the course of, in some cases, many years, ended up working for us in the end, but I don't think we were very good at it to begin with. And so I think that there were hard-won lessons around both who was the right profile, like who actually made sense on the team, like what did greatness look like, and then how to, talk with someone about the opportunity and, get them excited if they really weren't looking for anything. There were lots of kind of learnings there about how to do that well. And that took us a bit of time.
What are some of those learnings for folks that are, hiring right now? What's something you missed or learned?
I think, to start with, we actually biased a little bit too much towards looking for people who fit the archetype of well-known school, very young, had done the things that were like, high credential in those well-known school environments. And actually, like, I think we're lucky early on to find a lot of, fantastic people who are willing to, to do this with us, who were later careered. And so, yeah, I think we should kind of spend a bunch of time on maybe a little bit the wrong profile to begin with. And part of that was a seniority thing. Part of that was like, kind of an interest and experience thing too. We have hired people who are excellent, and very young, but they maybe look, in some cases, slightly different from, being straight out of central casting. Another lesson is just like, we very much evolved our interview loop. And so now we have like a hand-rolled set of interview questions, and then, kind of core to how we interview too is actually we have people on site for 2 days and do a project with us, a work test project. And that has worked really well, but increasingly refining that. And then, yeah, I think how to learn about what people are interested in and, put our best foot forward and letting them know about the opportunity when they're really not looking for anything and have those conversations. There's definitely been, gotten better at that over time.
Do you have a favorite interview question that you like to ask?
I think this 2-day work test, which we thought would not scale past a few people, has had surprising staying power. And the great thing about it is it lets someone go end to end on it, like a real project. It's not, work that we use as kind of a canned list of projects, but it gives you 2 days of seeing like a real work product. And it doesn't have to be incredibly time intensive on the team's time. You can take the time you would spend in like a half day or 1 day on site, and you kind of spread it out over those 2 days and give someone a lot of time to do work on their projects. And so that can actually help it scale. And then it really helps you. It helps to enforce, do you want to be around this person type test, because you are around this person, for 2 days. And so, bunch of meals with them. And so that one, we didn't expect that one to stick around, but that has been really, really important to our value process. And then also important to getting people excited especially at the very early stages of the company, because before people are using the product and know about it, and when the product is comparatively like not very good, really the only thing you have going for you is, a team of people that, some people find special and want to be around. And, the 2 days it would give us a chance to just like, have this person meet us and in some cases hopefully get convinced that they want to throw in with us. And so, yeah, that one was unexpected. Not exactly an interview question, but kind of like a form of interview.
The ultimate interview question. So just to be very clear about what you're describing, you give them an assignment like build this feature in our actual code base, work with the team to code it and ship it. Is that roughly right?
Yes. Not like, so we don't use the IP, not shipped end to end, but yeah, it's like a mock, like, very often in our code base, here's a real mini 2-day project. You're going to do it end to end, largely being left alone. There's collaboration too. And then, we're a pretty in-person company. So in almost all cases, yeah, it's actually just sitting in office with us too.
And you've been saying that this has scaled to even today's. How big are you guys at this point?
So we are going on 60 people.
So small for the scale and impact. I was thinking it'd be a lot larger than that.
Yeah.
And I imagine the largest percentage is engineers.
Yeah. The thing that's more than anything, and to be clear, a big part of the work ahead of us is building a group of people that is bigger and awesome and can continue to make the product better and the service we give to customers better. And so you don't plan to stay that small for long, or wouldn't hope so. But part of the reason that that number is small is the percentage of engineering and research and design is very high within the company. And so many software companies, when they have roughly 40 engineers, would be over 100 people, because there's lots of operational work, and often they're very, very sales led from the get-go. And that's just quite labor intensive. And, we started from a place of being like incredibly lean and product led. And like, we now serve lots of market customers and it built that out, but there's much more to do there.
A question I wanted to ask you, there's so much happening in AI. There's things launching there's like newsletters, like many newsletters whose entire function is to tell you what is happening in AI every single day. Running a company that's at the center, kind of the white hot center of this space, how do you stay focused, and how do you help your team stay focused and heads down and just build and not get distracted by all these shiny things?
I think hiring is a big part of it. And if you get people with the right attitude, and, all of this should be asterisked in, like, I think we're doing well there. I think that, like, we'd probably be doing better there too. And it's something that we should probably talk even more about as a company. But I think that, hiring people with the right disposition, people who are less focused on external validation, more focused on building something really great, more focused on doing really high quality work, and people who are just generally kind of level-headed and maybe like the highs aren't very high, the lows aren't very low. I think hiring can get you through a lot here. And I think that's actually like, a learning throughout the company is that, for any, you need process, you need hierarchy, you need lots of things. But for any kind of organizational tool that you're introducing into a company, the result you're looking to get from that tool also, you can go pretty far on like hiring people with the right behaviors that you want, like, to result from that organizational thing. And, the specific example that comes to mind is we've been able to get away with not a ton of process yet on the engineering front. And I think we need a little bit more process, but for our size, not a ton of process, by hiring people who I think are really excellent. One is, hiring people who are level-headed. I think 2 is just talking about it a lot. I think 3 is hopefully leading by example. And yeah, for us personally, we've, since 2021, 2022, been professionally working on this and been working on AI. And we've just seen a sea change of the comings and goings of various technologies and ideas of, if you're to transport yourself back to end of 2021, beginning of 2022, this is GPT-3, Instruct GPT doesn't exist. There's no DALL-E, there's no Stable Diffusion. And then, we've gone through all of those image technologies existing, ChatGPT and that rise, and, GPT-4, all of these new models, all these different modalities, all the video stuff. And only, a very small number of these things really kind of affect the business. So I think we've kind of just built up a little bit of an immune system and kind of know when an event comes around that actually is really going to matter for us. And this is, this dynamic too of there being lots and lots and lots of chatter, but then maybe only a few things that really matter, I think has been mirrored in AI over the last decade, where there have been so many papers on deep learning in academia, so many papers on AI in academia. But then the amazing thing is there are really a lot of the progress of AI can be attributed to some very simple, elegant ideas that have stayed around. And the vast majority of ideas that have been put out there haven't had staying power and haven't mattered a ton. And so the dynamic's a little bit mirrored in kind of the evolution of deep learning as a field overall.
Last question. What do you think people still most misunderstand or maybe don't fully grasp about where things are heading with AI in building and the way the world will change?
People are still a little bit, occupied too much either end of a spectrum of, it's all going to happen very fast. And, this is all, bluster and hype and super snake oil. And, I think we're in the middle of a technology shift that's going to be incredibly consequential. I think it's going to be more consequential than the internet. I think it's going to be more consequential than, any shift in tech that we've seen since the advent of computers. And I think it's going to take a while. And I think it's going to be a multi-decade thing. And I think many different groups will be consequential in pushing it forward. And, to get to a world where computers can increasingly do more and more and more for us, there's all of these independent problems that need to be knocked down and progress needs to be made on them. And some of those are on the science side of things, of getting these models to understand different types of data, be faster, cheaper, smarter, conform to the modalities that we care about, take actions in the real world. And then some of it's on like how we're going to work with them. And, what's the experience a human should actually be seeing and controlling on a computer and working with these things. But I think it's going to take decades. I think that there's going to be lots of amazing work to do. I think that also, one of the most, like a pattern of a group that I think will be especially important here, not to talk our own book, but I think is like, the company that works on automating and augmenting a particular area of knowledge work builds both the technology under the surface for that, integrating the best parts from providers, sometimes doing it in-house, and then also builds the product experience for that. I think people who do that, and we're doing it and trying to do it in software, people who do that in other areas, I think those folks will be really, really, really consequential, not just for like, the end value that users see, but then I think as they get to scale, they'll be really important for pushing forward the technology. because I think they'll be able to build, the most successful of them will be able to build very, very big businesses. So excited to see the rise of, other companies like that in other areas.
I know you guys are hiring for folks that are interested in, hey, I want to go work here and build this sort of stuff. What kind of roles are you looking for right now? Anyone specifically any roles you're most excited about filling ASAP? What should people know if they're curious?
There are so many things that this group of people need to do that we are not yet equipped to do. And so, kind of generic across the board, first of all. And so if you don't think we have a role for something, maybe if you reach out, that won't actually be the case. And maybe we can actually learn from you and kind of decide that we need something that we weren't yet aware of. But, by and large, I think that, two of the most important things for us to do this year are have the best product in the space and then grow it. And we're kind of in this land grab mode where almost everyone in the world is either using no tool like ours, or they're using one that's maybe developing less quickly. And so growing Cursor 2 is a big goal. And I would say, especially always on the hunt for folks who excellent engineers, designers, researchers, but then focusing all across the business side too.
I can't help but ask this question now that you talk about engineers. There's kind of this question of just code's going to write up all our code. AI is going to write all our code, but everyone's still hiring engineers like crazy. All the foundational models, so many open
we're not
roles.
out there treating the horn of people who can learn the code. So, yeah.
Do you think there's going to be an inflection point of engineering roles start to kind of slow down? I know this is a big question, but do you see engineers being more and more needed across all these companies, or do you think at some point there's all these Cursor agents building for us?
Again, we kind of have the view that there's this, both long, messy middle of, it not jumping to just you step back and you ask for all your stuff to be done and you have your engineering department. And, very much you want to evolve from programming as it exists today. We want humans to be in the driver's seat. And, we think even in the end state, that's, giving folks control over everything is really important. And you will need professionals to do that and kind of decide what the software looks like. So both, I think that yes, engineers are definitely needed. I think that engineers will be able to do much more. I think the demand for software is very lasting, which is, not the most novel thing, but I think it's kind of crazy to think about how expensive and labor intensive it is to build things that are pretty simple and easy to specify, or it would look like it to the outside observer. And, just how hard those things are to do right now. And so if you can, all of the stuff that exists right now that's, justified by the cost and demand that we have now, if you could bring that down by orders of magnitude, I think you would have tons and tons and tons of more stuff that we could do on our computers, tons more tools. And, I've felt this where, one of my early jobs actually was working for a biotechnology company, and it was building internal tools for them. And the off-the-shelf tools that existed were horrible and did not fit their use case at all. And then the internal tools I was building, there was definitely a ton of demand there for things that could be built. And, that far outstripped just the things that I could build in the time that I was with them. But yes, I think that it's still so, the physics of working on computers are so great. You should be able to kind of basically just move everything around, do everything that you want to do. There's still so much friction. I think that there's much more demand for the software than what we can build today with, things costing like a blockbuster movie to make kind of simple productivity software. And so I think long into the future, yes, there will actually be more demand for engineers.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention? Any last nugget of wisdom you wanted to leave listeners with? You could also say no, because we've done a lot.
We think a lot about how you set up a team to be able to make new stuff, in addition to continuing to improve the stuff that you have right now. And I think if we're to be successful, IDE is going to have to change a ton. What looks like is going to have to change a ton going into the future. And if you look around the companies we respect, there are definitely examples of companies that have continued to really ride the wave of many leapfrogs and continue to kind of actually push the frontier. But they're kind of rare too. It's a hard thing to do. And so part of that is just kind of thinking about the thing and trying to reflect on it, in our day-to-days and, the first principle side of things. Part of it is also, trying to get in and study past examples of greatness here. And, that's something that we think about a lot too.
Yeah, what you just told is before we started recording, you had all these books behind you, and I was like, what's that over there? It's like the history of some old computer company that was influential in a lot of ways that I've never heard of. And I think that says a lot about you, of where a lot of this innovation comes from, is studying the past and studying history and what's worked and what hasn't. Okay, where can folks find you online if they want to reach out and maybe apply? You said that there may be roles they may not even be aware of. Where do they go find that? And then how can listeners be useful to you?
Yeah, if folks are, interested in working on this stuff, would love to speak. And they can find, if they go to cursor.com, they can kind of both find the product and find out how to reach us. So
easy. Michael, thank you so much for being here. This was incredible.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode. You basically spend all your time working with founders, and through that, studying. You create frameworks and training, and you use that in your work. I think that's what many, many founders are looking for, is how do I avoid pain?
To be a founder is a state of being. It's an attitude. To be a CEO is a craft. The more founders who can accept that those are two separate things and they're both equally important to build an ascendant startup, the better all of us will be.
I'm kind of tired of talking about founder mode, but it feels like what you're describing is founder mode and manager mode.
Founder mode gets me angry. That article just got me hot. It really felt like an excuse. We were giving founders a permission to not learn the job. It's not manager mode is bad. It's the greatest CEOs know when to calibrate which one is needed.
Something you talk about is kind of these two phases to a startup journey, and most people focus on the first phase.
Phase one is build something people want to buy. Phase two, the one we don't talk about, is now you have to build a company around that thing people want to buy. Building a company is always the same. I don't care if it's medtech or fintech or hardware or consumer.
You've come up with this methodology that you call the magic box paradigm that helps founders think about how to lead to a successful exit long term.
This is a traditional sales process. You build a list of the companies that might want to acquire you. You ping them and you hope you get a deal. Magic Box argues that the best outcomes for early stage startups don't happen that way. You're never for sale. In fact, you have seduced a buyer. They see the fantasy. They fall in love.
Today, my guest is Jonathan Lowenhar. Jonathan runs a firm called Enjoy the Work, which I've heard amazing things about from so many people over the years. Their firm has a singular mission to help founders become great CEOs. They do this through a blend of mentoring and advising services, which are rooted in their study of how the best startups operate. They take these lessons and fold them into frameworks and advice and training that they offer their CEOs. Their insight, which you'll hear in our conversation, is that most founders don't come into the job knowing how to be a CEO, which includes learning how to do hiring, how to manage financials, figure out growth strategy, road mapping, planning, people management, and so many other skills that nobody teaches a founder. In our conversation, Jonathan shares the most common CEO failure modes that he and his team have seen, the magic box paradigm for successfully selling your startup, a bunch of advice for finding and hiring the best talent, a framework for building a repeatable go-to-market motion, why and how you should learn to trust your intuition more as a founder, and so much more. We could have gone on for so many more hours. Maybe he'll be back to share more advice. If you're a founder or hope to be a founder one day, this episode is for you. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes, and it helps the podcast tremendously. With that, I bring you Jonathan Lowenhar. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Lenny, I am damn excited.
So am I. The reason I'm excited to have you on this podcast is that you basically spend all your time working with founders and through that studying what causes them pain, what causes them to fail, what causes them to struggle. And then you take that and you create frameworks and training and you use that in your work with founders. And I think that's what many, many founders are looking for, is how do I avoid pain? How do I avoid these things that I'm going to probably run into? So to kind of build on that briefly, can you just help people understand what it is you do, what it is your organization does with founders, how you work with founders?
Yeah, thank you. I'll tell a bit of origin story that I think ends up answering that question.
Let's do it.
I had run a bunch of different types of companies, and they were really different ones. So I ran a big division for a public company, then I was a private equity CEO, then I did back-to-back startups. And the first one didn't get very far, but we sold it. And the second one got really far. And when I left the second one, I was, like many founders, grossly unhealthy. 25 pounds overweight, wasn't sleeping enough, all the things. And it took a few months to get healthy and then reflect on those parts of my career. And one of the things that I noticed at the time was all of those companies, when they got to a good place, when they started to run well, they were all run well in the same way. It's like, how could this be? How could public company, private equity, startups, early stage, growth stage, when they were run well, they were all run well the same way? So I started to obsess about this question. And what it led me to realize is that every well-run company has a rhythm. It's unmistakable. You can't miss it. You can't not see it. You just spend a couple of days, like through a spy cam watching a business, you'll see the pattern. So how come some startups get there and some don't? How does a founder learn the rhythm? How do they learn how to run a company well? So I started to ask investors, kind of obsessively. And I asked them, Lenny, all three questions. Same three, over and over and over again. First question was, well, describe to me your ideal founder. What's a great founder? And the answers universally were the same. Investors would use words that meant grit and tenacity and courage and insight. And I'd say, great. Question number two, describe to me a great startup CEO. And they use none of those words. How can that possibly be true? Instead, they describe skills. This is a person who knows how to build stuff and sell stuff and recruit people and raise capital and organize humans and financially plan. Question number three, my final one. Well, how does a founder learn those skills while doing the job? And I got blank fucking stares over and over again. So it led me down this path that I'm now 10 years into with my colleagues of, well, how do we help founders learn those skills so that their venture investors don't fire them, so that they can actually go build whatever company they want to build and stay in the job for as long as they want to stay in the job. So that's origin. That's what got me going.
This episode is brought to you by Pendo, the only all-in-one product experience platform for any type of application. Tired of bouncing around multiple tools to uncover what's really happening inside your product? With all the tools you need in one simple-to-use platform, Pendo makes it easy to answer critical questions about how users are engaging with your product, and then turn those insights into action, all so you can get your users to do what you actually want them to do. First, Pendo is built around product analytics, seeing what your users are actually doing in your apps so that you can optimize their experience. Next, Pendo lets you deploy in-app guides that lead users through the actions that matter most. Then, Pendo integrates user feedback so that you can capture and analyze what people actually want. And the new thing in Pendo, session replays, a very cool way to visualize user sessions. I am not surprised at all that over 10,000 companies use it today. Visit pendo.io/Lenny to create your free Pendo account today and start building better experiences across every corner of your product. P.S. You want to take your product-led know-how a step further? Check out Pendo's lineup of free certification courses led by top product experts and designed to help you grow and advance in your career. Learn more and experience the power of the Pendo platform today at pendo.io/Lenny. I'm excited to chat with Christina Gilbert, the founder of One Schema, one of our longtime podcast sponsors. Hi, Christina.
Yes, thank you for having me on, Lenny.
What is the latest with One Schema? I know you now work with some of my favorite companies like Ramp, Vanta, Scale, and Watershed. I heard that you just launched a new product to help product teams import CSVs from especially tricky systems like ERPs.
Yes, so we just launched One Schema file feeds, which allows you to build an integration with any system in 15 minutes as long as you can export a CSV to an SFTP folder. We see our customers all the time getting stuck with hacks and workarounds, and the product teams that we work with don't have to turn down prospects because their systems are too hard to integrate with. We allow our customers to offer thousands of integrations without involving their engineering team at all.
I can tell you that if my team had to build integrations like this, how nice would it be to be able to take this off my roadmap and instead use something like One Schema, and not just to build it, but also to maintain it forever.
Absolutely, Lenny. We've heard so many horror stories of multi-day outages from even just a handful of bad records. We are laser focused on integration reliability to help teams end all of those distractions that come up with integrations. We have a built-in validation layer that stops any bad data from entering your system, and One Schema will notify your team immediately of any data that looks incorrect.
I know that importing incorrect data can cause all kinds of pain for your customers and quickly lose their trust. Christina, thank you for joining us. And if you want to learn more, head on over to oneschema.co. That's oneschema.co. There's obviously this new meme of founder mode. I'm kind of tired of talking about founder mode, but it feels like what you're describing is founder mode and manager mode. You basically have to be good at both. This latter part is almost manager mode. Is that a way to think about it?
Yes. Founder mode gets me angry. That article just got me hot.
Do share.
It really felt like an excuse. We were giving founders a permission to not learn the job. If we think about an ascending startup, there's this phase of I have to invent something. I now have to figure out how to get my customer in front of this invention and see if it works. I then have to build a business model around that to see if there's some repeatable way to attract, win, deploy my customer, and thrill them with whatever the solution is. Okay, now I have to go build an enormous amount of demand. And then I have to build up an operation that can handle all that demand. Oh, and by the way, at some point, figure out how to turn positive revenues into positive cash flows. The idea that the founder who's writing code by themselves doesn't have to advance their skills to learn how to do all those things. And that, in fact, what the article even implies is learning how to do those other things is a negative is bananas to me. The things required to launch a company are not the same as grow a company, as scale a company, as exit a company. And the best startup CEOs learn them all along the way. There are lots of ways to learn them. I'm not suggesting there's only one path. But founder mode was almost an excuse not to. I do think what's unique about a founder that felt perhaps where that article was trying to go is that unlike the professional mercenary CEO that gets dropped in, the founder knows everything about what built this company, and they can drop in at the most granular level and play anywhere. And they can drop into a product feature, they can drop into a customer conversation or a partner conversation, or with a longtime employee that's still in IC and be impactful. And then rise back up if they've gone the training and get back into a cockpit to run the company again. And that's, to me, the distinction. It's not manager mode is bad. It's the greatest CEOs know when to calibrate which one is needed.
I love that. I'm glad we got there. I wasn't planning to talk about founder mode, but I think this is really helpful for folks to hear that are founders and people working for founders too. Along these same lines, you have a really helpful and really funny also kind of mental model for how to think about common failure modes of founders. You kind of have these labels that I love. And this is actually the first thing I heard about Enjoy the Work is like these labels that you guys use. And you also have a similar mental model for failure modes for a startup. Can you just share these modes that you've come up with?
Yeah, and we do take a bit of a comical approach to some of this. As I've shared with you previously, the name of our company is not an accident. If we can't be playful, we can take the work seriously and not ourselves. So we do fuck around quite a bit. I think if I would separate failure modes for companies versus CEOs for a minute, the company ones are not quite as comedic, but they are ones we see all the time. One is you chose the wrong market. I don't think we need to belabor that one. Lots of your prior guests have talked about the importance of getting that part right, or nothing else really matters. Second, back to what we were discussing a minute ago, like build something people want to buy. Got to go build the right thing. Cool. Third one, founder dysfunction. We like to joke that more companies die from suicide than homicide. And it's grim, but also if the 2 or 3 people in charge of the business can't get along, nothing else matters. It's all going to break apart. And then fourth, execution. And execution now leads back to CEO. Okay, so now we have a bunch of playful ones here. We have the robot CEO who believes emotion should not ever exist at a startup, at which point we train them on a very simple formula. Emotions are messy. Humans have emotions. Startups need humans. Therefore, startups are messy.
I love how engineering oriented that advice is, which makes sense for a robot CEO.
I also a little bit more graceful of an answer there is also our CEOs want urgency and passion and excitement from their teams. They want them working enormously hard for below market comp more often than not with this promise of equity that might return value 5 or 10 or 12 years later. They want them to bring all of that emotion, but they're supposed to figure out how to surgically cut off the emotions that are inconvenient. That's the robot CEO who believes that we can just have sterile robots working for us and you just press a button and they do a thing. Second one's a pleaser CEO. This is the person who is far more concerned with being liked than running a business. So they can't tell anyone hard news. They can't break ties. They want a consensus on everything. And that's not possible. If you have a group of thoughtful people working for you, they're going to fight. They're going to debate, and you want them to. And then at some point, you have to call it and say, no, we're going left, not right. Or the two of you need to go get in a room and deal with something. Or, hey, the way you just showed up is not the way I want you to show up. The pleaser CEO won't do any of that. They will simply hide and pray it goes away, and it won't go away. Next one's the perfectionist CEO. I like to say that these are the CEOs with the most beautiful product to be delivered minutes before they file for bankruptcy. This is the person who is far more concerned with being right and believing that there's always a right answer than just moving forward. It creates two problems in a business. One is you're just slow. And the other one is you'll never take any bets because you will build a team that realizes the CEO is not allowed to be wrong. So you can't disagree. You can't use intuition. You can't use gut. Everything has to be utterly factual. And that is simply not possible. In early stage startups, you have more questions than you do answers. Everything is circumstantial. It's not like watching CSI Entrepreneurship and you get to see a video to say, oh, look, the guy did it. No, we have a bunch of little data points. You have to come to a conclusion. The next one's the angry CEO. I had a founder of mine a bunch of years ago, and we were seeing a pattern across the leadership team. And he and I get on the phone one morning, and I said, I have a theory for you. Might be a story, I might be wrong, but I want to share. He said, okay. I said, I think you wake up in the morning angry and you don't know it. And then you get to the office and you beat the crap out of the first employee that crosses paths with you over something utterly unrelated because you're angry. You realize it a few hours later and you apologize, and your team hasn't quit yet because they believe you're a good human who doesn't have good self-control. And then I shared with them, and you just had your first child. So my guess is, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, that you are modeling something that's happened in your life. Is this something you want to change? And his answer was yes. And I said, great, I have good news and bad news. The good news is because you said yes, we can do something about it. And the bad news is I don't know what to fucking do. That's not my job. The point being, no one wants to work for the angry person. I don't care what the equity potential is worth. No one wants to work for that person. And the moment they see greener pastures elsewhere, they're leaving. The next one is the one that drives me particularly crazy. It's the laissez-faire CEO who insanely believes that I can just hire great people and utterly ignore them and let markets take care of themselves and they will do all the right things. I have never met anyone, Lenny, that didn't benefit from good management. And the laissez-faire CEO believes that management's not required. And so what they ultimately find is they have really, really good people doing utterly disconnected things and goals are not achieved. So every CEO we can reductively reduce to one of two characters. They're either comfortable with the brake or comfortable with the accelerator. The challenge with those who are comfortable with the brake, what I mean by that is they don't want to spend any money. So they're driving this beautiful sports car and they're just leaning on the brake the whole time. So yes, they won't run out of money. And yes, they will also get lapped by everyone else and miss the opportunity. And so where their opportunity is where can you take bets? Where can you actually downshift that car in such a way where you give yourself a chance in the market? Separate, those who ride the accelerator. We've all met this one. They're going to run out of money really fast. And this kind of connects to one of our other challenging CEO types, the ready, fire, aim. Most CEOs are really bad at planning. And that's because there's this little known secret in the Bay Area. Most CEOs never run a business before. Planning doesn't have to be some heavy, bureaucratic, multi-month exercise that begins in August and ends in February. But a little bit of bottoms-up planning to say, what are we trying to achieve? How do we quantify it? What resources are required? What humans are going to do what? How do we shorten feedback loops so we know in a week, in a month, in 2 months, whether we're on the right trajectory? The ready, fire, aim CEO says, I don't want to do any of that because they're improvisational and they just want to take bets and they want to take shots. And that's what got the company started. And that's also what have the company go bankrupt. The micromanager one is the opposite of laissez-faire. They believe that no matter how many employees they have, they can do the job better. The challenge with this one is it is massively disrespectful to those who work for you. And we think that, and this is a bit insulting, that everyone that works for a founder can be fit into one of two chunks. They're either an adult or a child. I have a 3-year-old. My little girl's amazing. I'm utterly in love. And if she doesn't have a lot of structure and a lot of supervision, she's going to run into things, man. Into things, off things, through things. But adults don't need to be given utter instruction and watched all the time. In fact, it needs to be the opposite. We agree on what success is, what resources are, and you let them go. And they'll come back to you when they have questions. The micromanager CEO doesn't see the difference between those two humans. They don't trust anybody. And that's actually the thing under the thing under the thing. So they want to do everyone's work. And that will succeed right up into the point everyone quits.
This is amazing. Okay. So let me recap these labels that you have just for folks. I have them written down here. So there's the robot CEO, perfectionist CEO, pleaser CEO, micromanager, laissez-faire, ready, fire, aim, riding the brake, and then riding the gas. And as you said, the ever popular angry CEO.
You got them all.
And as people hear this, they're not, I imagine people self-identify a few of these. Like, I have some of this, I have some of that. And it's not like black or white, right? No one's like, I'm 100% robot CEO and I need to fix that, right? It's like a pie chart kind of, I don't know, what's the visual of this? Everyone's got a little bit of this, basically.
That's right. I enjoy giving this talk on stage and watching different founders in the audience cringe at different moments. But it doesn't mean that they're all one or the other. If they were all one of these and then didn't want to even accept the possibility that there's a little bit of a lot of these that they could work on, they're probably not coachable and they're not going to be in the talk anyway.
So like, I imagine each of these is very particular and it's this journey you go on to, work on yourself. So let me just ask, what's the most common issue that you found across these labels of type CEOs? What's the most common one? And what do you often recommend someone work on specifically to help them through that?
I think ready, fire, aim is the most common that we've seen. And that has been an affliction that's been growing in the last number of years. It wasn't long ago that CEOs could paper over poor execution with easy access to capital. And suddenly, over the last number of years, we're expecting founders to be better operators. Better operators means eventually being on a path where more cash comes into the business than out of the business. That doesn't happen by accident. The ready, fire, aim CEO has probably suffered this pain, where they took lots and lots of bets. Maybe they measured the outcome after the fact, and they were wrong, and they were wrong, and they were wrong in ways that were expensive. And they've raised their hand to say, I see it. I want to get better at this. Basic business design and business planning is not some corporate effort. It's some thoughtful exercise that starts with, what are we working backwards from? Because at any given time, Lenny, companies are working backwards from one of four things, whether they like it or not. I am working backwards from an exit. I'm working backwards from my next fundraise. I'm working backwards from profitability, or I'm working backwards from winding down. We don't talk about the fourth one that much. But I got to choose one. I got to choose the top of the mountain. More often than not, they're choosing a fundraise. So then we'll ask that founder, you know your market, you know your investors, you know the next set of investors. We've done some intel. What has to be true to unlock the next fundraise? And that's a qualitative and quantitative answer, but we write it down. We need to get better at go-to-market. We need to land our first partner. We need to launch next iteration of the product and show this level of efficacy, engagement, what have you. Can we codify that? Yes. Can we talk through what actions would be required on what cadence to unlock that quantified set of results? Yes. Do we understand what resources would be required to do those things? Recognize we might have to squint through some of it, but again, the answer is yes. We've now aimed. If we have a culture that has some accountability, that has a communication architecture, so there's some rituals about how we meet and how we share information and how we talk through problems and how we work through bottlenecks, well, now we have a plan and now we have accountability. I now no longer have to just guess all the time. And this only works for the CEO who says, my improvisational efforts got me here, but I don't think they'll get me there. There's a guy I worked for a long time ago, and he had this phrase. He had like 7 or 8 phrases. He would use them over and over and over again. It was hard not to commit them all to memory. And one of them was, if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you're getting. And for the ready, fire, aim folks who realize the weakness of that at scale, the way to counteract that is to start with good planning.
It's interesting. That's the most common type of CEO. When with founder mode, it feels like it just accelerates that further. The whole meme of founder mode, which is what makes you upset, in my sense. Great. Okay, so I love that you talked about exiting as basically one of these 4 working backwards paths, because that's where I wanted to go next. I want to talk about some of these specific frameworks and skills and methodologies that you teach. And one of them, and it's kind of like, I want to almost go to the end of selling your company. And the reason I'm excited to talk about this is, if you think about, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels like most startups that succeed end up selling their company. That's the most likely success, right?
Yes, by and large, by far.
Great. Yeah, because the other option is IPO, or just like run this privately forever. Or fail, basically, and fold. So of the successful options, the most common is selling. At the same time, founders have never done this before. They don't know what they're doing. The other side often has done it many times. And so it's a pretty treacherous and scary and high stakes thing to do and to learn on the spot. And you've come up with this methodology that you call the magic box paradigm that I love, that helps founders think about how to lead to a successful exit long term. Can you talk about what this is?
I can, and I want to give credit where it's due. So there's a book by this name. It's called Magic Box Paradigm, written by an independent banker named Ezra Roizen. And the book's fantastic, and Ezra's fantastic. What we've done is we've operationalized it so that we could teach founders over and over and over again. If the founder wants to hire a banker for this particular process, because we're not bankers, we're not BD, we don't get paid that way, we're teachers. But if they wanted to hire a banker, go hire Ezra. But the methodology itself is a inversion for how venture and venture boards have thought about startups being ready for sale for a long, long time. It's utterly counter to so much advice that founders have heard. There are 2 ways you can get acquired. This is purposely reductive. One is you put up a for sale sign. This is a traditional sales process. You build a list of the companies that might want to acquire you. You figure out the categories of buyers, the companies there, the contact list within that. You ping them and say, we're open to a transaction, or some euphemism, the like. You contact them and say, I'll give you some information now, sign an NDA, give me an indication of interest by this date. And you work through a process and you pray you have more than one person at the end of the game, try and ratchet them up, sign a term sheet. They will then retrade along the way, right up into the point you die, and you hope you get a deal done.
Sounds very familiar.
And it's one that often will just hit the nervous system of any founder that's been through it a couple of times, because man, is it a fraught exercise. What Magicbox argues is that the best outcomes for early stage startups don't happen that way. You're never for sale. In fact, you have seduced a buyer. You have brought someone in. And there are 3 stages to Magicbox work. There is learn the fantasy, there is prove the fantasy, and there is quantify the fantasy. All right, so what the hell do I mean by a fantasy? You're an early stage startup, and you meet a company that is in your space, in your vertical, what have you, and they're much more advanced than you. It's a large business. Generally speaking, another oversimplification here, large companies are interested in small companies because they're technology, and small companies are interested in large companies because they're distribution. And there's someone at the large company who becomes fascinated with you. What's the fascination? What they see in their head is, oh, interesting. If I buy your company, this thing happens. The classic example of this is Instagram. Like, this is the number one example of this. Lenny, do you remember how much revenue they had when they got acquired by now Meta?
I think it was 0.
I think it was 0.
Okay.
Do you remember the acquisition price?
$1 billion, which was absurd at that point.
There was no math Facebook could use, historically speaking, that would justify $1 billion. It had to be a model on the future. This is Magicbox to a T. They had a fantasy that adding Instagram would expand ad revenue. They figured out some way to prove it. I'll explain more on what I mean by proof. And then their quantification was based on the future. And that's the difference between a Magicbox approach and traditional approaches. Traditional approaches are based on the past. Magicbox is on the future. Let me tell a story. In one of our companies in construction tech, their technology was able to suck in video camera data from construction sites for project planning. No one was doing this yet. And the business was doing pretty well. We helped the founders launch the company. We got first product in market. We raised a couple of rounds of capital. The product mostly worked. But we weren't sure it was venture scale as we were going along. And we had some large construction tech companies and real estate companies and development companies leaning into us. And one particular company then said, we're really good at construction planning. And we've collected all of this video data that we don't use at all. And the champion on the other side in the product org, he has a fantasy. Oh shit, we take your video analytics platform and plug it into what we do, and this is what happens to my business. Now, the person on the other side is a person. And the reason I'm being specific about that is because you don't sell to a company. Magicbox is about finding the person. You're finding the champion on the other side. The person who is motivated for their own reasons, career, money, reputation, what have you. They see the fantasy. They fall in love. And this person says, I'm in love with this idea if I can grab security data into my product org. Now I have to prove the fantasy. What's different about a champion in this kind of process is they want to find a way to say yes. They're not looking for a way to say no. And this brings us to the 4 characters you're going to meet along the path of Magicbox. There might be a 5th. You're going to meet your champion. You're going to meet your advocates. You're going to meet your blockers. And you're going to meet your buyer. You might meet corp dev along the way. Let me talk about each of those folks. The champion is the one who's fallen in love. They're the ones with the fantasy. They're the ones who are arguing on your behalf. They're the ones fighting for you when you're not in the room. They are texting you. They're telling you things about the business that they're probably not supposed to tell you. The buyer, all they care about is math. It might be a committee. It might be a group. The IC, the EC, the investment group, what have you. They're the ones who actually can sign off on a deal. They care about business case. Advocates. Lenny, do you play chess?
I have played chess, yes.
You have played chess. So advocates are pawns. They don't matter at all until they matter enormously. These are folks that, like, you're the CEO doing a meeting with your potential buyer, and there are somehow 12 people on the Zoom call, but only 2 do the talking. The other 10 might be advocates. They're rooting for you, but they will take no political risk. Their value is they can give you intel. Blocker. This is the person who can't say yes, but they can say no. This is OPSEC. This is procurement. This is legal. You're going to meet all these characters during the Magic Box dance. Your champion just wants you to get the deal done because they're so in love. So what happens is they've come up with a fantasy, and you as a CEO need to lean into it. This isn't enterprise selling. I'm not trying to sell you this thing that I have. I'm just trying to find ways to say yes. So when in my story, the person says, could we provide you all of our video data that we've collected forever, and you now could enhance our ability to predict whether large-scale construction projects are on time? I don't want the CEO saying anything other than, we can do that. Now, phase 2, I need to prove it. Okay. Because I have a champion who wants to say yes, proof can be really easy. And the reason the proof is so important is not to convince the champion they're in love with the fantasy. They're already convinced. It's because in almost all cases, big companies buying little company, and your champion doesn't have unilateral authority. They're going to socialize the deal. They have to get buy-in from who? The aforementioned buyer. They have to be able to survive the aforementioned blockers. So eventually, when they pitch this to whatever committee is in charge, that committee is going to say, what proof do we have that it works? And we just want to be able to provide the champion with enough evidence that it works. So in this case, we said to the champion, well, give us video data, and we will provide you the evidence that you need. But because we're dealing with a champion who's not a cynic, because champions aren't, we could tell them and provide us the data in this way, in this fashion, and here's what we'll send you after. Are we in agreement? We know we're already going to win the proof, and it's critically important in these dances. Number 3, quantify. At this point, we're not up for sale, but we're spending a lot of calories on somebody, and they know it. So we have our CEO say the following phrase to them. My board's asking questions. They're wondering why we're spending so many calories on this when it's not really core and we're not selling you our product. I'm convinced of how exciting this could be together, but I think we need to do some math so I can explain to my board why this might matter. So let's imagine all this works, because it's going to work, and it's a year from now or 5 years from now. What changes about your business? And the champion will tell you. Retention does this, or deal size goes like this, or market share goes like this. And you'll say to them, fantastic. Look, I'm going to build some shitty version of the model. You tell me what I got right, what I got wrong, but I have a board meeting in 16 days, and I need to be able to walk them through the justify why I'm spending so many calories on this exercise. You build the model, you hand it to them. If they in any way respond to your model, you've won. Because you have now divorced history from future. And you are now playing in future. You are playing the Instagram game in this case. The ending of the story for the company that I was describing, it was a business sub 2 million in revenue. Our prospects of raising Series B felt low. We were not yet profitable. And that was an exit that was generational wealth for the co-founders and their families. The CEO went on and spent 2+ years with the now public company that did this acquisition. The technology did get integrated, but it took a long time, and they had to do a lot of changes to it, certainly beyond what was envisioned during the diligence process. But all parties are happy. And if we hadn't done it this way, and we had just been up for sale, we get $1 for that company. A couple of other side points that are really important here. For any of you founders out there that are thinking about working backwards from an exit, there are 2 things that I really want to stress. One is the fantasy is beyond just what is the business change you can have. The fantasy is your books are in order. Your fantasy is all of your investors will sign off on the deal and you will have unanimous consent. that the key members of your team are going to stick around, that you're a joy to work with. Please, God, founder, do not puncture the fantasy at any time. So whatever is starting to shape in your buyer's mind, get to know it. Live that. Everybody wins from that game. Second, corp dev. They will probably show up in this dance. Corp dev make deals. They are not deal sponsors. They are not a champion. They are not a buyer. They are an expert negotiator. Their job is to facilitate deals and get deals done. The most important things to understand is that they can be a leverage point to have a deal move with some process and some pace and some urgency. Because either deals have momentum or they die. And corp dev can help there. Second, they are way better at negotiating than you. So, anytime dealing with a superior negotiator, the only thing you can do to try and even the scales is move the negotiation async. So founders, repeat after me. I'm talking to you directly now. You will say to corp dev, you know I am not alone in this decision. I love what you just said, and I'm excited about this opportunity. Once I see it in writing, I can socialize it with advisors, lawyers, co-founders, whoever. But don't negotiate live, you will lose.
Let me just say that was extremely delightful to listen to. I've never heard like a M&A strategy be this fun. And it makes me want to sell a company. It's like, okay, let's do this. I'm hyped. I think you got it all. I have a few questions. Interestingly, the middle part it feels a lot like enterprise sales, which a lot of founders are used to. Understand the stakeholders, move things forward. Here's your champion. Here's your blockers. Here's the buyer. Is there anything there you want to say, just like what's like maybe most different from enterprise sales, which I think a lot of founders are maybe used to? Or is it like pretty similar?
Yeah, I think three things. One is there are a lot of moments in enterprise sales where we're trying to push for a compelling event. That doesn't work in seduction. The playful metaphor that we'll often use is you've been dating for a while. This person could be the person, but they're not quite convinced yet that like it should be a life together, and you're sitting at dinner. And in enterprise sales, you're eager to get it done. You're eager to like move the relationship forward and move in and get engaged, what have you. And so you might be inclined to say, hey, either we move this relationship to the next step, or there are a whole bunch of people eyeing me and I'm going to go date someone else. That conversation never goes well. And in Magic Box, founders are eager to do the same thing, thinking that competition will improve their deal size. When in fact, I think more often than not, that is a negative signal until the very end of the dance. So instead, in enterprise selling where I'm pushing, in Magic Box, I'm always trying to entice. I'm never, ever trying to push. So instead, I might say things like, hey, I'm going to raise my next round in Q1 because I've been intending to do this business independently. Now, all I really want to do is win. I just want my product in as many customers' hands as possible. Whether I do that on my own as I was planning, in partnership with someone, or under someone else's roof, honestly, I don't care. But I have a company to run, and I'm going to go raise my next round in Q1. And if I do that, we're probably too expensive for this deal to make sense anymore. And my board will want me to move on anyway. I'm enticing. I'm never trying to push.
This episode is brought to you by Vanta. When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things get complicated fast. Now you can assess risk, secure the trust of your customers, and automate compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more with a single platform, Vanta. Vanta's market-leading trust management platform helps you continuously monitor compliance alongside reporting and tracking risk. Plus, you can save hours by completing security questionnaires with Vanta AI. Join thousands of global companies that use Vanta to automate evidence collection, unify risk management, and streamline security reviews. Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/Lenny. That's VANTA.com/Lenny. Okay, so I'm thinking about as a founder hearing this, and I feel like what they're probably wondering is that first step of finding that person, starting to build this fantasy. Any advice you could share for a founder that's like, we probably need to sell this company? What can they do to start creating these relationships, find this person, create this fantasy in their minds?
Ezra does this really well in the book. Again, it has to be not solicitous. So one of our companies, we had maybe 20 months of capital left. And the two co-founders and our team were convinced this isn't a venture business. We thought it might be a venture business. It's not a venture business. It takes too long to do a deal that's not that interesting with each of our enterprise customers. It was disappointing, but at least we were honest about it. Okay, so who are we going to sell to? Let's go play this game. So we start with categories of buyers. It could be, for this particular example that was in my head, ERP companies could be a buyer, large banks could be a buyer, the big software companies like Microsoft could be a buyer. There were a few different categories. Then we said, great, who are the companies within those categories that make sense? They're acquisitive, they have the balance sheet for it, there's a corp dev department, so we know that they actually know what they're talking about here. Ideally, there's an existing relationship with core team or advisors or board members. Make a list. Now, how do we meet them in a way without selling them? So one of the examples in the book, which I love, is small startup wants to meet the luminaries in a space. And they have their PR agency set up a panel where they contact the CEOs of the potential buyers and say, we're putting together a panel of the world's foremost experts in X. We're going to put 4 people on the panel. And it's going to be you and famous person number 2 and famous person number 3 and this 4th person that is a luminary to us. And it's our startup CEO. And suddenly you're at the table as a peer. It's a completely different conversation. The second one, and this is going to sound a little silly, but I am not exaggerating, it works. If you are a CEO founder and you have that title on LinkedIn, it's amazing the responses you'll get. So we made this list and we just started to send connection requests to the CEOs or CPOs or CFOs on our target list and said something as simple as this. You're doing something really cool. So are we. You game just for a 30-minute chat? Because I don't know where it'll go, but I think it'll be fun. Keep it that informal. It's peer-to-peer. I'm not selling you anything. If you can draw a line to like some post that they had or some speech that they gave, even better. But we found without fail, there would be math that would show up. 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5, or 1 out of 6. Yeah, that sounds fun. Because a lot of those CEOs never talk to startups. And that's fascinating to them, especially when presented with the energy of, I just want to have a fun intellectual discussion. What you're looking for in that first conversation, and this is what we ask our CEOs to do, is to ask questions like, what do you care most about in the next year? What's the mandate? What about for your department? What are the things that keep you up at night? What's the break? What's the thing that could actually kill everything? If you had a pre-mortem for the next year, those kind of open-ended questions, because what we're our CEO listening for is the fantasy. To see if there's some intersection between what they care about and what we might be able to squint and say we do.
It's interesting because it sounds a lot like there's like a jobs to be done framework here, or just like, what is the job they need done? What is the pain you're going to solve? And then create a fantasy around how amazing it'll be for them if you can solve that problem.
And ideally, they'll say it and you just reflect it back in active listening.
Mm-hmm. Chris Voss negotiation style. Okay, so you're the kind of guest, Jonathan, where I could, like, the whole podcast could be about each one of these topics. And so I know there's so much more to talk about here. Let me just leave folks, I want to move to a different topic, but to leave folks with, one is if they want to explore this methodology more, there's a book you mentioned called Magic Box Paradigm by Ezra Roizen, right? If companies want to, like, are in this process starting to think about it, does it make sense for them to come to you and like, hey, help me through this process? I know you said like go to investment banker. When does it make sense to like, hey, let's bring on Jonathan or someone from your team to help them?
We meet 2 types of founders. Founder one says, fix this part of my business. Totally transactional. I want to raise the next round, or I'm hiring people badly, or my founders aren't getting along, or I want to sell my company. Lenny, to be honest, that's not interesting to us. That's not our work. Go find someone who is, and I don't mean this disparagingly, but like a screwdriver, like fixes one thing, go fix one thing. Then we meet second type of founder. And that founder says, most likely to themselves, because it's the only safe audience, there's some gap between the CEO I am and the one my company needs me to be. There are a set of skills that I'm great at, and there are these things where I know if I'm really honest with myself, if I listen to the quiet voice, I'm soft at these things, or I'm not good enough at these things, or I have some imposter syndrome about these things. And if I don't get better at them, danger. That's the one we work with. And it's when they care that much about both the hard skill development and maybe the soft skill development in their path to become a great CEO. How to sell the company? It's one of the skills. We teach this to all of our founders, as well as hiring and management and planning. I don't care what the thing is. For every one of our founders, we audit them and say, here's what you're great at, and here's what you're shitty at, and here's what you've never done before. And which of these do you want to work on next, given where the company is in its cycle?
Great segue to where I wanted to go with this, which is hiring. So I hear all the time that a founder's core job is fundraising and hiring an amazing team. Basically, that's like their main goal. Just like hire amazing people. The people you hire make your company, create the culture. You got to get that right. But similar to trying to sell your company, most founders have never really hired lots of people. They've never hired for all these different skill sets they're trying to hire for. And I know that you guys spend a lot of time helping founders hire and find amazing people. Can you just share some of the advice you share with founders for how to find and hire amazing people?
Yeah. So we actually think the CEO has three jobs. We agree with two of the two that you said, but we think there's a third. One is make sure everyone knows where we're going. Mm-hmm. The second one, pick the right people for the team. And third one, give those people the tools they need to win. And you can abstract from those what they all mean, but
love that.
Most founders are really bad at hiring. They fall prey to all sorts of pretty common human biases. The lazy ones, back to laissez-faire, think it's just gambling. Like, oh, cool, they worked at Meta and Salesforce already, so hire them. Right? Just gambling. There was work done by, and then codified in a beautiful book. I'm going to make sure I get the names right. Jeffrey Smart and Randy Street. They had a consulting firm that dates back to the mid-90s, and they wrote a book in like 2007 or 2008 called Who, the A Method for Hiring. We have operationalized that book and then expanded on it because there's some parts of it that we found a little dated, but it's really still as applicable today as it ever was. And I think there are three core mistakes that founders make all the time that can be really easily rectified. The first one is you should hire people who have already done the thing you need to have done next. And I know that sounds simple, but founders don't think of hiring that way. They start with a job description. We've been taught that for a long time. Start with the job description. It's a fucking mistake. Start with, it's 12 months later. You hired the person, they started today, 12 months have gone by, you're clinking champagne because of how great it's been. What's changed about the business? What does success look like 12 months later? Document it. And then when you interview people, look for people that have already done that stuff. Second, the notion of, does the person in front of you have a history of creating raving fans? They talk in the book about this idea of you've been pulled or pushed in your career. If you were an outstanding performer in job A, it is a high likelihood that in job B, someone associated with you in job A is going to pull you into the next thing, and then pull you into the next thing, and pull you into the next thing, and you'll never do a job search because you were great. And if you see a history of that, ding, 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 really attractive candidate. Third, core values matter a lot. Culture is not an accident. Culture at scale is the codification of what matters to a business and the ritualization of living those values. It starts with whoever the founders are, and then it will emanate across as long as the founders are super consistent. But that also means you need a methodology for evaluating the next human in front of you on whether they actually represent your values. We think of these interview stages in a way similar to the book. We use slightly different language, but we think that there is a culture interview, there is a functional interview, and there is a technical interview. But they're designed to get at these notions of, have they actually done this kind of work before? Have they been pulled or pushed in their career? And are they your kind of human?
Funny on that last detail, actually, I imagine you know this, at Airbnb, there was actually a core values interview team that was formed around studying what the founders, Brian and Joe Nate, valued specifically, and then they codified them to core values of the business. And then there's this team that was like a very select, handpicked team that at every interview loop interviewed the person for values.
That is a beautiful example of how interviewing for values is independent of title, because you'll find people in the company at every stage of a company that are the best ambassadors, the best embodiments of those values. Please use them for interviewing. And in addition, they love it because they're protecting their castle. Like, they love where they work. They want to keep it that way.
Mm-hmm. So true. That team was very real special team. And I was really honored to be on that team. So let me summarize what you just shared, which I love. There's so much value here. It just keeps going and going. So when you're hiring, your advice is look for people, one, that have done it before, two, that have been pulled from job to job by someone else that loves their work and wants them to be with them at this new company. And then three, their values match the values of the founder and the business, essentially, right?
Yes. And if for the recruiters out there, a really simple way to kind of get rid of a lot of the crap that ends up showing it up to the top of the funnel is just to ask the simple question, even in the cover letter, of your last ex-bosses, how many would get on the phone and say, you're amazing? If there's any equivocation in the answer, great, move on.
So a couple follow-up questions here. One is this point of hiring people that have done it. Obviously, this implies don't hire kind of junior up-and-comers as much. Thoughts on just like when it makes sense to hire someone more junior that's like really ambitious, real smart, you think they can learn the job. Thoughts there?
So one of our companies is hiring a team of reasonably junior account execs. We're looking for folks that have been out of school for 2 years. Now, that means they are highly unlikely to have had 3 years of quota achievement and a similar, you get the point. Okay, so how do you hire someone who's already done it? We know what success looks like 12 months later. For that role, they've learned how to hunt. They've been able to create pipeline of X and close Y in business, et cetera. What we are looking for then in their history is they have any sales chops of any kind. They could be selling Girl Scout cookies or tickets to some event, or they worked for a nonprofit for a while. I don't care, but I want some evidence that they've sold. I want some evidence that they're comfortable getting on the phone or showing up at meetings or showing up at events. So that they've done it before should be reviewed or thought of creatively.
Got it.
Now, for more senior roles, I want it explicit. We think of, for example, for executives, Lenny, we think there are 3 types of executives that startups end up hiring over time. We call them the architect, the optimizer, and the scaler. The architect, let's use sales as an example. This is someone who has to build a playbook. So they are going to uncomfortably stay close to the founder, watch and listen to recordings and pick their brain to pull the magic from the founder of like, oh, here's the dance that she or he goes through to actually close a deal. And they write first playbook. And the goal of the codification of that is so you can bring on a first account exec and the next account exec. Because account execs, back to our language earlier, in this adult-children dynamic are children. You need to give them structure for them to win. That's the architect. The optimizer. This is someone who's now going from a few account execs to maybe 10, 15, And we now have targets we have to hit. Like the business is now reaching a different level of professionalism and expectation. And you have to optimize that earlier playbook to try and find more efficiency and performance out of it. The scaler is saying, okay, now how do I find leverage? How do I have 10x more account execs, or how do I get other people to sell for me? They're all going to be called VP of sales or chief revenue officer. They're completely different archetypes. And that same person exists in engineering and in product, et cetera. In those cases, I only would want to bring on an architect if they've been an architect before. If they'd only been an optimizer, they are going to fail because they've never written playbook from scratch.
It touches on a conversation I had recently. It was a live podcast recording with Shreyas Doshi at my summit, where he talks about a lot of people are really frustrated at work because they're in the wrong one of those buckets, essentially. Like you enjoy a certain type of work and your job is not doing that type of work, whether it's, in your case, scaling or optimizing. And so it just reminds that if you're frustrated at work, you may be you're in the wrong job in terms of the type of output they're trying to expect from you.
The story in my head is that talking to me and my colleagues sometimes can feel a little like death by frameworks. We have one for everything. And in this example, I think if you're going to be sustainably successful in any kind of job, I don't care what it is, 3 things have to be true. You have to be good at it, you have to like it, and the market has to give a shit about it. Yeah. And if one of those is off, you're not staying in that job long.
Yeah, and this touches on the name of your firm. Enjoy the work. You got to enjoy the work to make it sustainable. Okay, one other thing. So one other follow-up question real quick on the hiring, and then I want to talk about one other bucket of work. And again, I think each of these could be like an hour, 2 hour long podcast conversation. I love that there's this recurring theme of working backwards to inform what you do today. So earlier you talked about working backwards from what the outcome you want next for your business, whether it's fundraising or exit or winding down. And for hiring, you have the similar advice. Work backwards from what you want this person to achieve in the first year, whether it's drive this sort of growth in the product or drive sales. I guess anything else there of just like the power of working backwards versus the typical approach for hiring. You talked about job descriptions.
Hiring is never the goal. And it's often the first thing that we'll hear from a founder. I have to hire this person. One that is so dangerous for confirmation bias. Like the hiring manager is always the one most burdened by that particular bias, but it's also hiring is never the goal. So we will pull them back to over and over and over again. Which of the 3 milestones matter? Right? Fundraise, exit, profitability. What is to change about the business, for example, to get to that fundraise? How do we quantify that change? Some sort of goal setting framework. OKRs, EOS, I don't care. All goal setting frameworks have the same bones. There's some description of it. There's some quantification of it. There's some work that has to be done. There's some accountability rituals with clear owners and clear agreements. So once I actually have the quantification of here's what work needs to be done, I now know what resources I need to be able to pull that work forward. And therefore now I know what kind of humans I need, whether I'm hiring or renting. And that should drive the conversation, not the, oh God, I need another PM. It's no, here's the set of features that we've said matter most this year. Here's the gap in the resources we have and the resources we need. That's why we're hiring this role. And here's what success would look like 12 months from now or 6 months from now. So they're tying back to what would change about the business. And this is this recurring theme of our work with our founders. They're so in it, Lenny, that they rarely have time to sit above what they're working on, this notion of working in the business versus on the business. And so much of our work is to separate them from the day-to-day, which is enormously important, not in any way denigrating it. And I need to know where I'm headed and why, and how I'm going to measure progress along the way. And so much of what we're doing with them is to say, I want to hear from you what you think success looks like. I'm going to push back and pressure test a bunch of things. Can we define that in a way? Can we agree on who needs to do the work along the way and how we're going to keep checking on it to keep feedback loops short? Now we can go back in the business. And then we'll check again in a week or in a month.
I love that. It's actually a great segue to the final bucket I want to spend some time on, which is growth and go-to-market. Another area that many founders have never worked on before. A lot of founders are like, hey, I have this awesome idea. I'm going to build this awesome product. I know how to do that. I know what market needs. But building a go-to-market motion to get it into people's hands is like a whole different skill. We spent a lot of time on this on the podcast. You have a really cool, simple framework of just like how to think about go-to-market. There's always like, oh, you need a go-to-market strategy. Talk about how you talk to founders about thinking about what it takes to put together a go-to-market plan and how to make it a repeatable motion versus just, I'm just going to go to people and try to sell them.
Our founders, even the most capable of them, find this topic pretty overwhelming because it branches into so many areas. So we do try and distill it to something that is in bite-sized chunks. We think of it in 4 pieces. The first piece is ideal customer profile. Who do we really want to sell to? What are their qualifications? What are the discovery questions we would use to get to those qualifications? What are the kill criteria to know that this is fool's gold? This really isn't the human. Second bucket, loosely called marketing. But within that, marketing is also positioning. So what is our uncommon denominator from the enemies? So who are we competing against? Is it actual companies or is it status quo in some sort? What are they great at? What are we great at? What are we great at that they're not? And then how do we represent that in the world? That's branding and artifacts and identity work, et cetera. Next is demand gen, which we'll simplify to say, how do we go find the humans we want? I've long loved the book Traction, Gabriel Weinberg. I'm going to forget, unfortunately, the co-author's name right now, Jason Maher. Sorry. Where they talk about the 19 channels that all companies have availability to. They're the same ones. Now, the book has got a couple of years on it, so there are a couple of new channels that have popped out since. But what we then try and expand the aperture for our founders is rather than just think about meeting your next customer through however you did at your last company, availability bias. Instead, which of these might make most sense next? A simple 2x2 matrix can work here, like some experimentation, some brain writing. Love brain writing, not brainstorming. I know you've talked about that on prior pods. And then high impact, low effort. Can we think of the 3 or 4 experiments we want to run by channel? Let's go play. And then fourth, sales. And this is the codification of a playbook. How are we having the conversation? How are we doing discovery? How are we handling objections? How are we doing demo? How are we moving to close? If we can get through those 4, then we can start to talk about deployment and customer success and upselling and account management, et cetera, et cetera. Those are good problems to have. Oh my God, my install base is so large, I need to manage it. Great freaking problem. But we try and break this complexity of going from individually selling to building a machine into just these 4 buckets. Who am I selling to? What do we want to say about ourselves? How do we reach them? How do we close them?
Amazing. I was going to summarize it. You did an excellent job there. Before we follow up on this, you mentioned this term brain writing. What does that mean? Oh,
first time I heard of this was Adam Grant. I don't know if he's the originator of the idea. Brainstorming. You talked about this a bit in your Annie Duke podcast as well, of how horribly coercive meetings can be.
For brainstorming especially.
And so what many of our founders don't recognize, because they just see like, hey, I'm just sitting around a table with a group of folks I respect, so we can just debate things as peers. No, you can't. You're a founder. Your voice has a megaphone attached to it, even if you can't hear it. So you have to turn down the megaphone if you actually want to learn what your people have to say. So brain writing is, I'm going to expose an idea, and I want everyone to now write and weigh in on their offer. It could be in a survey, it could be in a shared doc, what have you. My preference is in through some sort of methodology, you are now sharing your opinions, comments, edits, dreams in an async way that no one else can see until it's all combined, maybe even ideally without authorship identified. Then when the founders weigh in, you don't know. They're just a part of the mass. Let everyone read the thing. I even like the Amazon, like take the first 10 minutes of a meeting. Let's just go read so we're all fully present. and then have a debate. What it allows for is the dampening of the founder effect in meetings.
You're just so full of golden nuggets. There's just like a random tangent that I think could be really transformative for a lot of teams. So the advice here is just when you're trying to ideate and brainstorm, don't go in a big room and put Post-its on a wall and talk throughout ideas and have a discussion. Instead, just everyone individually sits and thinks and shares their thoughts, and the founder presents like, here's a prompt, here's a question we're trying to tackle.
What it also allows for is an evening of the playing field of between fast processors and slow processors, introverts and extroverts, because they're all equally potentially talented in your room. But if you do live brainstorming, you have diminished all the folks that prefer to sit and chew on something first.
That's very much me. That's exactly how I operate. I need to think and process. I'm not like on the spot, quick thinker person. So 100% fan of this approach. Let me come back to your go-to-market framework. I have the notes pulled up here. So basically, if you're a founder or even a product builder and you're trying to think about people keep telling me I need a go-to-market plan. I need to grow this thing. How do I think about this? You're basically saying there's these 4 buckets to think about. Who are you selling to? How are you going to motivate them and get them excited to buy your thing? How do you reach them? And then how do you close them?
Yes.
Luckily, I have podcast and newsletter post on every single one of these buckets. If folks want to pursue each one of these, I have templates for ICPs, marketing advice, all these things. So that's good news. There's a lot of content for people to read if they want to explore this stuff. Let me ask you, where do you often find the biggest bang for your buck when you come to a founder? If a founder comes to you and they're like, I need to figure out go-to-market motion. Is it just like start from the top and work your way down? Or is there like, here's where you want to spend a lot of time?
Early stage founders, and this is certainly more true for the first timers, Lenny, than the veterans, because they learn this problem. The first timers are like 20-something-year-olds in a bar, and they're being social for the first time in their lives. And anyone that makes eye contact with them is enough for them to say, I want to go on a date with you. That's it. There's no discrimination of any kind. Like, oh my God, they like me. I'm in. That's the mistake that hounds first timers. The veterans, and those we get our hands on, instead we say, let's imagine you could build your perfect customer in a lab, like Petri dish, and you grew them. What do they look like? And if you have any kind of install base, I'll ask the question. I just did this with the founder the other day. They are enterprise whale hunting business. They have 4 large customers.
Like actually whale hunting in terms of large wealth person or actual whales?
The extreme of enterprise selling.
Okay, got it. I want to see a whale hunting startup. Okay, go on.
I said, so which of your 4 customers is your favorite? Which one, if I got them on the phone, they would rave about you. They would be salivating openly with a chance to evangelize what you're doing for them. And they was like, oh, that's clear. It's this one of the 4. Great. Tell me about them. And what you start to see and pull apart from that is the founder does have an ideal profile. They do have a dream. Now, there are all sorts of risks about is the world too small? Is it not a big enough market if they get too tight? And founders get so caught up in that, and it's a mistake. Because all we're looking for in the beginning is a white hot center of opportunity, a small population that is an enormous fan, is getting enormous impact. We can worry about adjacencies and expansion later. I like to remind them that Amazon just sold books. We can start with one thing and be great at it. So where the founders often get hung up on for us is that they've moved towards selling without contemplating ideal customer profile, without contemplating qualifications, without contemplating discovery questions to get to that, and most importantly, kill criteria of, if this is true, do not sign them, even if they want to go out on a date with you.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I believe and I hear often on this podcast, is how underappreciated picking your customers and early leads are. And if you think about this funnel you described, figure out who you're selling to, how do you motivate them, find them, and then sell them. All this trickles down from who are you going after? Like, you will know how to motivate them if you know who you're talking to, versus the opposite. If you're talking to everyone,
it's the most expensive mistake of those four.
Mm. Okay. Is there anything else on go-to-market or growth that you think might be helpful just to touch on before we close up our conversation?
The one thing I'll share, this goes back to the ready, fire, aim that we talked about earlier, is that there's implicitly a funnel, a mathematical funnel to what we just described. And founders often make the mistake when planning for the year ahead of, I need to be at this revenue to justify this multiple. And then all of the funnel math is a plug. And that's death. As opposed to, here's what's been true for the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And then what assumptions can I reasonably make with ways I'm going to influence that funnel going forward to go build up to where I think I'll be a year from now. And it just lowers the bias that your planning process operates with. But when a founder starts from a place of, I have to get to 3 million or we're dead, you're already dead. As opposed to, what do I really believe I can do to get there? Changing top of the funnel, changing conversion rates along the way, changing deal size or deal length, et cetera, based on my recent history. And then have a conversation about the gap between where I think the business reasonably can get with some ambition and where I think I need to be financially. Because that's the more mature conversation. And that's the one the ready, fire, aim CEO doesn't have. That's the one most founders have only started to learn to have over the last few years when capital dried up.
I love that. I love just how practical and real talk your advice always ends up being. Speaking of that, I emailed a founder that you work with and asked him, what should I ask? What should I ask Jonathan when he comes on the podcast? And he said something that was really, that's great. It was really unexpected what he said. He said that the biggest lesson he learned from you is to, as a founder, to trust his intuition more throughout the journey of his startup. Can you just talk about that as something you've learned, something you've seen that maybe founders underappreciate?
It's impossible not to be a startup CEO and not face many existential moments. Is my company going to survive? Did I make a mistake? Will I ever be hired again? Should I sell the company now? Should I break up with a co-founder? Should I fire this critical employee? They happen to all of us. And fear is not a good decision maker. Our lizard brain is a really bad decision maker in those moments. And so what we'll often share with the founder who's facing one of these scenarios, and I know the CEO you're describing, and he was facing one of these scenarios. We'll say to them, do you know that little voice when you get really still, the quiet one that says, you should marry this person. You should take this job. You should start this company. Watch out for that human. They're a bad one. And most of the time, Lenny, when I frame it that way, the person across from me says, yep, I know that voice. And I'll ask, how do you hear it? And there'll usually be some version of, I have to get really alone, really still, really quiet. Walk on the beach, listen to music, work out, play with my pet. I said, that voice is who you are. It's not your brain. Your brain is a tool. It's our hands, it's our feet. It's just a tool. It's a pattern recognition machine. But who you are, if you can watch your brain, you know what you're thinking. Like, oh, look what my brain's doing. That means you're not your brain. It's something else. And that's the little voice. And that little voice is going to be right. And where we get screwed up in life is when we stop listening to that voice. When the mania of our chaos of our lives get in the way of that voice. And so whenever our founders face one of those moments, it's not a framework, it's not a playbook, it's not, or even a directed piece of advice from us to say, you should just go left. I've seen this before, go left. Nope. I trust founder intuition. If the founder says, this business is still going to work, or this co-founder is the wrong person, or yes, it's time to sell, I'm in. We're just here to support them. And we try and be the only person in their life that is fully on their team, because we're not on the preferred side of the caps table. We're not fiduciary. We're not board members, not a co-founder, none of those things. And so in those moments, we'll just say, can you get really quiet? And the founder you're talking about, I have the story in my head, he was facing a breakup moment with his co-founder. And I asked him, because he's good at getting quiet, what did the voice say to you way back when? And the voice said to him, this is the wrong fit. This isn't going to work. He believes in different things than I do, and that's going to go badly. But the lizard brain didn't want to believe that. And so it took another year.
Wow. I had tingles throughout that entire piece of advice. I love how it's also very applicable to just life, not even just being a founder. It's a good reminder to trust that voice more. It's interesting that this also connects to founder mode a little bit, and I'm curious how you think about that, where a lot of the founder mode advice is like, trust your judgment, don't hire people to delegate things away. Do you see kind of a difference in like the core idea of founder mode and just like, you should actually trust your intuition more?
Intuition comes from, in my point of view, a deep understanding of self and the capacity to get quiet and be well resourced, meaning you've slept well and you've eaten well and you have enough love in your world. And I think what founder mode can confuse is my intuition says I should just do this job for them and fire these 3 people. That's not intuition. That's reaction. That's a fear response. And when the founder says, I sat with this, I felt it out, I can see it, I need to terminate my whole go-to-market team and start over. This isn't working. And I have data that supports it, but I know this isn't working. I'm like, let's go with that. I'm in. Let's do it.
And I think you described a lot of times people feel this and it takes like a year, 2 years, 3 years, many years to actually realize that. And your advice here is try to listen to that more and trust it more. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, Jonathan, to pivot our energy, is there anything else you want to leave listeners with? Last piece of advice, anything that you think might be helpful before we get to our very exciting lightning round?
To be a founder is a state of being. It's an attitude. It's courage. It's instinct. It's a capacity to push through despite all sorts of evidence suggesting you're wasting your time. To be a CEO is a craft. The more founders who can accept that those are 2 separate things and they're both equally important to build an ascendant startup, the better all of us will be. And so what I would encourage every founder out there that wants to go build something substantial, go work on your craft in addition to working on the business. Be honest with yourself about, here's the shit I'm bad at. I don't know how to read a financial statement. My board meetings suck. Half my meetings that I have with my leadership team, we all walk out of there saying, what did we just accomplish right now? Or I get to the end of my workday and I'm like, I didn't get anything done. Those are all examples of just not taking the craft seriously enough. I'll leave with that.
I love that. And I think I've made the mistake during our conversation of confusing founder and CEO and assuming they're the same thing. And I really appreciate you just, again, pointing out to folks that that's kind of the big distinction you got to start making is there's the founder and there's the CEO. Often they're the same person, but different parts of your brain and different skill sets.
And I'm now fully off the very awkward soapbox I've been sitting on for a long time. So we can go to lightning round whenever you're ready.
With that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. Jonathan, are you ready?
I'm ready.
First question, what are 2 or 3 books that you have recommended most to other people?
My number 1 business book that I've recommended would be 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I do think it always comes back to team. The right team can solve all the things. And that book is a beautiful distillation of the most common problematic archetypes that show up in a leadership group. So that's the number one.
Amazing. Anything else you'd recommend?
The second one, it goes more personal. It's a book called Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Was at least for me, the first introduction to this idea that I am not my brain. And that my brain can be a tool that serves me well and at times doesn't. So that would be number two.
I've started to read that book and then I never finished it. So this is a good reminder to give it another shot. Second question, do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show you've really enjoyed?
I just watched and really enjoyed, by the way, I have a 3-year-old at home, so the amount of content I now consume is reduced tremendously. But my wife and I just watched Will and Harper. This is the documentary between Will Ferrell and his very dear friend who just recently transitioned, and they road trip across the country together. And it was freaking delightful. It was sweet and endearing, and one of the better things I've watched in a while. TV show, Slow Horses. I'm utterly addicted. I'm only in midway through season 2, but I've been voraciously sleeping less and watching more.
I've loved both those. I just watched Will and Harper and completely agree with your sentiment about it. I wasn't planning to watch it, and my mother-in-law started watching. I'm like, wow, this is really fun. It's like also funny, like meaningful, funny.
There's so many moments in it that are really sweet. As an aside, this was April 2020. And a group of our very close friends said, hey, how are we going to keep in touch? And so we started what we called Movie Club. And we routinely either pick a TV show or a movie. We all watch separately. And every 2 weeks, we get together on Zoom at night.
Oh,
we talk about what we just watched.
I love that.
And some have been great, some have been terrible. But Will and Harper was our most recent.
Oh, such a cool tradition. Okay, we'll keep going. You have a favorite product you've recently discovered that you really love? Could be an app, could be something physical.
2, and one is I'm going to talk my own book, but I still love it. The first one is Aura Frames. These are digital picture frames. They're amazing. The UX for them is incredible. The quality of their pieces of artwork. So grandparents, in-laws, parents, we have multiple in our house. Just love it.
And it's just to clarify, it's like a frame that has picked digital photos, and you can like give it to your mom, your mom, and show photos of your kid, like wherever they live. Right?
And the combination of the ease of the software and the quality of the imagery is better than anything I've tried. And I've tried a bunch of them, AURA frames. And this is not an Enjoy the Work company. This is just one I'm a giant fan of. The second one is an Enjoy the Work company called Augie Studio, AUGIE Studio. This is Canva for video. It can turn anyone with no engineering skills whatsoever, no code video creation with full editing tools. So suddenly you can create branded, high fidelity, high quality commercial video in minutes with no effort. It's amazing. It was built by 2 media tech co-founders that were building this thing pre-ChatGPT, and it's just growing like this, and it's super fun, and the guys are great. So AUGIE Studio.
Sounds amazing. Augie Studio. I could use that. That sounds awesome. 2 more questions. I feel like this one's going to be a good one. Do you have a favorite life motto that you often come back to, find useful in work or in life?
The first one, and the one that I probably most commonly refer to, is that there is only one life. The quick backstory, and I know it's a lightning round, but I'm guilty of these stories. I went for a walk with a girlfriend of mine a bunch of years ago, and we did this once a month. And we would always have a pretty typical ritual of kind of giving each other life updates to begin the walk. And so I started the conversation with, so, there's the family update, and then there's my work life, and then there's my social life. She's like, no. Stop. That's all bullshit. It's one life. Stop assuming that there are these pretend walls between them or among them. I've lived that ever since. So I try and show up. That phrase lets me show up the same way no matter my setting. If you and I were having a beer or a meal, Lenny, or if I'm sitting with one of my co-founders or clients, it doesn't matter. I show up the same way everywhere. Part of the way I enjoy the work is by having a real friendship, a real intimacy with everyone at Enjoy the Work and including our clients as well. I want that level of conversation. I don't want the sterile stuff over here with my work environment versus my personal versus my family. It's just one version of me.
And the phrase is, it's just one life.
Just one life.
It's just one life. Final question. So you ran a casino at one point, I believe, and it was like a Harrah's casino. Is that right?
My first career was in the casino business.
Okay.
But before I go on, what's the question?
The question is just, is there a fun story or experience or lesson from that time in your life that might be fun to share? Maybe a mob involvement or cheating or something, because I imagine that's a unique life experience.
I'll tell one of my favorite family stories then briefly. But yes, my family goes back in casino gambling in one form or another, several generations. My great-grandmother ran a illicit poker game. My grandfather ran numbers out of a gas station. My father's been in the casino industry since Atlantic City in the 70s. My sister is a prominent gaming attorney, and I worked in the industry for a dozen years. So like, this is my family. And Lenny, I didn't know any of this was weird until I was like in my mid-20s. I turned 21 and I'm old. Yes, I'm going to just hide the year. I'm kidding. Anyway, I turned 21 and we take a family trip to Las Vegas because that was normal for us. My father was doing a lot of work out there, so he got us hotel rooms, et cetera. I'd never been there before and I was newly 21. And so my parents said, you have $300 to gamble with. We're going to be here for 5 days. This is a vacation. My grandparents are coming in. My uncle and I were coming in, and they're encouraging me. This is all up to you, but try not to lose it all on night number one, which was good advice to give me. I was 21 and I was pretty much a schmuck at the time. But also part of my experience being there was to interview for a summer internship. I was a college going to be junior. So we go. And I immediately go sit at some table and start playing some games. And I turned $300 into a few $1,000s in the very first evening. And that was exciting and it was crazy and it was wild, et cetera. On the third night, which happens to everyone who goes to Vegas for too long, we're all delirious because all of us is staying up all night and being silly and being stupid. And my parents asked me, by the way, this is pre-cell phones. They asked me, hey, can you stay awake? Your uncle and aunt are going to arrive late tonight. They'll call the room. You can come down and just greet them and say hello. Sure. So I get the phone call like 11:30 at night, go on downstairs. They're here. I go downstairs in the casino floor. We're staying at the Las Vegas Hilton. It's since been renamed. But I go downstairs and I can't find them anywhere. Okay, well, I have cash in my pocket and I'm now awake, so I might as well gamble. Shortly thereafter, Lenny, I have an experience that happens 1 in 369,000 occurrences, and I win $35,421.92. For the trip, I ended up winning $40,000 that I turned $300 to, and I was just 21 years old, which has left me with one of my mantras that I've had for the rest of my life, which some people roll their eyes at, but that is, gambling does pay.
I love that you remember the exact amount. What games did you end up playing that helped you win so much money?
The primary game that I played was Caribbean stud poker, where there's no skill of any kind. You get 5 cards, the dealer gets 5 cards. Whoever wins, wins. And if you have particularly unusual hands, you get odds on the hand. And I got dealt 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of spades and 5 cards.
I thought you'd say like slots or something. I love that you're just sitting there playing poker and went from $300 to $40,000.
It's not even real poker.
That was a great story. I'm glad I went there. Jonathan, this was incredible. I think we've helped a lot of founders through this conversation. 2 final questions. Where can folks find you guys? Who would be a good fit? What should people know about Enjoy the Work? And finally, how can listeners be useful to you?
Love that. So let me unpack those 3. The first one is enjoythework.com, or just find me on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. Send us a note. Who should ping us is very simple. If you're a founder out there or a CEO out there, and you know in your heart that there's some gap between how you're running the business and how the company's going and how it could be going and how you could be running the business, if there's some gap there, we're here to help. Now, our expertise, as we talked about in this call, is company building. So if you just have an idea on a napkin or you have a science experiment that you're not sure, we're useless. Like, that's not us. But if you have some breadcrumbs worth following, like the business is starting to work, you're Series A into B and beyond, and you know that like there's better, you can see it. That's where we help. Send us a note. Love to chat. How can listeners be useful to us? So we are voracious readers. All we try and do is study, how do the best startups do X? From tiny things like how do they run all hands meetings or offsites to the big meta topics of what is going to repeatable go-to-market even mean? Or what is financial planning in a way that's useful? Or how do you set goals that won't make you roll your eyes? We consistently learn from the ecosystem of podcasters and authors and journalists, like, go look at this material. So if your listeners have a favorite X on whatever topic in running a startup, send it my way. All we love to do is read and chew on that stuff.
Awesome. And the best way to send that is either through Enjoy the Work or LinkedIn.
That's right.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Lenny, this was so damn fun. Thanks for listening to my crazy casino stories.
I want to hear more, but we got to go. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.